recall if I did it before or after. I don't remember the exact time frame, but I did a review for Daylight's End. Oh, it was after. So I'm sorry, this was before.
Okay.
So I did a review for Daylight's End, and then Gary had posted that you were going to be looking into Daylight's End as well too. So I was actually on the chat as well too. I was like commenting all that stuff as well. And anyway, so from there, after watching that episode, I was like, okay, so I'm going to go back and watch when I can to check out some of this stuff you guys have done as well too. So I did check out a few along the way, and then I even checked out some of the ones you've done that you've posted on your YouTube channel, along with some of the ones that are still available on Twitch, just to kind of get myself familiarized with how you go about it when you're on your own. I just want to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
Anyways, long story short, it was my introduction to you.
Okay.
So having seen what you have done, you had a wonderful personality. I was like, I want to talk with you about how this all came to be. So obviously you shared before in the past about how you were more or less just trying to, I think, I can't recall how you said it correctly, but it's something to the effect of there was a lot of stuff you weren't aware of and hadn't seen before. So you thought this would be a good chance for you to kind of just watch these movies that people have talked about that never have heard of before, or maybe never heard of, but didn't grow up watching. So now you took this time to do that here. So that was pretty much the birth of your channel here. So having seen with what you've done here so far, I have become a fan of what you've done. So as a result of that, I wanted to reach out and speak with you, and hopefully bring some more awareness and people to be aware with what you've done here, and build up from there. So I was going to ask you about how, because I was really curious. I don't think I've ever heard you said before, at least from the episodes I've come across here, how the first time you did it, because I never saw the first episode you've done, but the first time you'd done the first episode, how you felt about yourself at that time about doing it, and then how things have changed for you along the way since you've done it. Like, I feel like, I would imagine for you feel like certain things have gotten better, how you handle certain things, and then things you may have said that, I don't know, maybe I should have just taken that back. A lot of things I'm sure you would have changed, but I'm curious about how you feel, how you've progressed from when you first started to where you are with it now.
Okay, so when I first started, these were actually live shows. So I did them at a bar called Mom's Basement here in Birmingham, and it was like during the pandemic. I'm a comedian, but I was like, I need to find something other than stand up. So when I was starting these out, it was me. I had a co-host, and we would bring on a guest comedian. And I realized at the time, I was like, 3 voices is too many up here. We only need me and somebody else, or my co-host and somebody else. And so that's, I think, the biggest change that's happened is when we first started, it was me, a co-host, and then a guest. And they were live shows that we did at a bar. And then when I started on Twitch, that was when I made the decision. I was like, it's just going to be me and a comedian, and bringing them on. And I think the biggest challenge and the biggest thing that I've had to learn is that just because my guests are hilarious on stage and they're funny and we get along well in the comedy scene, does not always mean that when I sit them down in front of a camera for 2.5 hours, that they're still going to have that same energy. And that I had to learn how to carry that energy through as well, because being turned on for 2 hours and like interacting, it's a lot. It's like my face would drop. I wouldn't be as like excited halfway through the movie, like, oh, this is exhausting. Which I'm 1.5 years into it now. So it's like, we're doing like double, triple features, and I'm like, let's go. And my guests are like, I'm tired. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge, or the biggest kind of wake up call that I've had, was like realizing the amount of energy that went into it.
Right.
And then I'm trying to think. I think the other thing that I've gotten a lot better at is dealing with like trolls. I don't get them so much in the chats anymore, because I have some great moderators that they delete stuff as soon as it comes up for me, so I don't have to handle it. But I do get a lot of DMs outside of Twitch that at first, like, I would like kind of get to me, because I'm very upfront about, like, I haven't seen a lot of movies. I've seen some stuff that I like, so that's why I'm doing this. But I had especially at the beginning, before I kind of like had curated my fan base, I would have people DM me. They're like, why are you trying to talk about horror if you don't know about horror? And I'm like, talking about it because I don't know about it, and I'm watching it and I'm learning.
And hold on, so you actually got people that are criticizing you for talking about a genre, or at least a certain film in the genre that you're not aware of it to learn about it, and they're still criticizing for that?
Yep.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was great. It was great. Which I mean, like, and on the flip side, that I had so much support. The horror community has been absolutely, like, I've been blown away by the support and like the people that'll like reach out, they're like, this is awesome. I love this. And like the fan base that's kind of curated around cult comedy.
Yeah.
We have like a Discord server, and like I loved like watching everyone just talk. And I'm not involved. It's just like they're just talking about each other's days, and they, hang out with each other. And it's like, this is great. I love it. Not like creepily watching them. Like I'm in the chat too, but like I'm like, look at you guys.
So now, here's what I'm actually curious about with you, because I don't know if you've ever commented about this before. Um, and I'm hoping if I ask a question, you may be able to answer here. But
Okay.
I'm curious if you had someone on the show that you're watching a film with here, and you realize right away this connection here is not working at all.
Mhm.
So you sort of hinted at it. You kind of have to carry the weight at that point. But do you don't have to name any names. I'm not asking you to do that. But if whenever you're talking with somebody about this here, and you say, listen, man, I was doing the show with you, but I got nothing back from you. We're not gonna do this again anymore. Like, what's that that communication like after the fact there, when you said before you have a great relationship with somebody on stage, but then outside of that, it's not so much the same type of momentum you guys carry elsewhere. So how do you personally deal with that when you're with somebody that just does not have the same wavelength as yourself?
See, it's a really tough one, and it's kind of a case by case basis. I'm sorry, my dog's
It's
barking. They're
okay.
normally asleep when I'm in here.
Okay.
But hey, please stop. Trying to think. It's a case by case basis. So like I with some people will be like, hey, look, I love you. I love your stand up. I think you're hilarious. You're just not good at the show. The show isn't stand up. Don't take it personally. Um, you're great, but no. A lot of times comics, I mean, comedians are very intelligent across the board with
Mhm.
they're very good at picking up on social cues.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people come off, they'll be like, I did terrible. And I was like, it could have been better. And so like I try to let them down easy. But I do have a rule where
So it's like a
I was like, I treat
breakup.
it like baseball. You have 3 tries. Because
Oh,
like I've
okay.
had comics come on the first time. I had one comic fall asleep on air. He was so tired that he just passed out, which is, I mean, I start at 10 p.m. my time. And so I'm getting comics that have, gone and they've worked all day. They've hit like 3 mics, and then they show up here and they have
Mm.
work at 6 a.m. And so it's like, hey, like I need 2 hours of your time. And it's just like this poor guy just passed out, and he kept like trying to wake up. And I was like, hey, we're gonna cut the stream. You're gonna get out of here. I'll let you come back later. And he came back and crushed it.
Mm.
So I try to give people 3 chances, but after that third strike, if you haven't gotten it, you just don't come back.
Interesting. For you? What's actually the worst? I'm gonna ask this question. What's the worst thing about having to vet someone out? Because again, if you're, for example, like with Gary,
Mhm.
when you became acquainted with Gary in the beginning, was there any hesitation, at least from having him being on the show and maybe not knowing a lot about him, but then thinking, well, if it works, then it works. If it doesn't work, then I'll break it to him the same way too. Because I would imagine that with the people that you bring on the show, know them firsthand, and then you
Yes.
bring them on, so you have an idea who you're dealing with here. But not having somebody you've never met before be on the show in that capacity is a little bit of hesitation on that end as well too.
There was I wouldn't say so much hesitation, there was a lot of anxiety. So I don't know if you heard me talk about how Gary came on the show. I just got a DM from him one day
Hmm.
that was
I
just
think I
like,
vaguely remember that.
yeah, he was like, have you seen Purgatory Road? And I was like, oh, this guy's got, an automatic messaging. And I just messaged back, and I was like, I'll message back, and he either responds and says, I'd love to be on your show because I watched the trailer. I was like, oh, this is perfect. Um, or he doesn't respond, and I just realized that I can set up automatic messages somehow.
Okay.
And he messaged back. He was very, very nice. And it was the first time that I had like a virtual guest on. So I was like, oh, I need to figure out how to kind of finagle this, because right now it's like I have my camera set up, people come, they sit on the couch with me and we
Mhm.
watch a movie. So I had to kind of learn that flip side of it, and all the audio issues that come with streaming and doing a Zoom call at once.
Mhm.
But with Gary, what I did was we had like a Zoom call. We had a phone call probably about a week or two out before I made the announcement that he was coming on. We talked. He seemed fine. And I was like, there we go. I was like, I think he's not a creep. We'll be good. And then we Zoom called before and I was like, no, guy's not a creep. It's totally fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and so he, came
I
on the
think Gary will
show,
appreciate
and
that.
you gotta watch out, like
Yeah,
that's one thing
I
I
know
was
what
like,
you're
are you
saying. Yeah, I
creeped
agree
out?
with you. I totally agree with you. But
And so he came on, and I mean, as a host, especially with like someone that hasn't done this before, like there is that certain level of like carrying. It's like, it's okay, it's gonna be fine, like don't be nervous.
Mhm.
Because I mean, like I went through that anxiety probably the first 3 months I did it, of just like, oh gosh, I'm live on air. I have to watch what I'm saying, I have to watch what I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And Gary was, I could tell there's kind of like that, am I doing this right, for probably about 15 minutes. And then it like clicked and he was just perfect
Mhm.
the rest of the time. And I was like, this is great. So Gary's vetted several people onto the show, and then those people have vetted people onto the show. And that's kind of my vetting process when it comes to actors and directors, is like, it's kind of like a web of people. If I don't reach out to you, if someone else that's already been on can vet for you. That's how
Mhm.
that works. And then
I
it's the
see.
same with comedians, because I have comics on that I've never met before until they show up at my house. And I'm like, please don't kill me. Let's go.
Well,
So,
so let me ask you something about this real quick here because I'm curious about because last time when you and I were speaking to try to get the set up here, you
yes.
were not feeling so well, and I remember because you already had the schedule set up for yourself to do a streaming that night, and that was for Reefer Madness.
Yes.
So I was watching that because I was like, I wonder how she would do. I was thinking to myself because I do remember you kind of you said that to me beforehand. I think you were hinting that before on social media if I recall correctly. But anyways, so I'm wondering if at any point when you're doing something, even if you're in a really good state of mind, good health, whatever the case may be, do you ever have a moment where you feel like I just don't want to do this right now, but I'm already like halfway through and I have to get this done? Do you ever have those
Very,
moments that feels that?
I have those moments at least once a week. And it's
Really?
because of how much I do it. So, with my, between I'm in work, or I work, I'm in school, I host an open mic, I try to hit 2 or 3 open mics a week, and then I do this 3 to 4 times a week. Or
Mm.
I stream 3 to 4 times a week, and then I do one live show a week. So like I have like one night off a week, and I love what I do. I absolutely love it. But it's kind of that like, I equate it to what people were talking about when they're like, "Oh, I don't want to go to the gym," but then I go to the gym. I love it. And it's kind
Mm.
of that, just, it'd be really nice just like not getting off my couch and just cuddling with my dogs. And I was like, no, but I need to go stream. I need to get up and go stream. I got to do it. And
But why do you feel that way for yourself? Here's the reason why I'm asking because for some people, um, I'm not sure if certain people will understand that motivation you have. I think I do, as far as
Mhm.
why you would do it, because same for myself here as I talk to people on the show. But for yourself, like why do you feel compelled to do that? Because if you have so much on your plate and then doing this, which may in a lot of people's eye may be considered, well, you can just eliminate this to get yourself caught up, rested up, and then be able to focus on other things. And then whenever you have time, go ahead and do this. Like that. What's your perspective on that and why you feel so motivated to do it?
I will say when I first started, it was, I wanted to keep doing, I wanted to see where it could go. And now it is, I have people that have me set on their schedules Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights, 10 p.m. I get to tune in and hang out with Natalia and everyone else and watch movies.
Mm.
And I've had people reach out and they're like, this is my, escape. This is what I get to do to like sit down at night and unwind. And I get to hang out with you and I get to hang out with my friends in the chats. And it's, I don't know if these, outside of, talking on Discord or on Instagram, if any of these people have ever met in person,
Right.
but I'm providing like a safe space for people. And I don't ever want to take that away. I was like, this is what I've made.
Mm.
And
So
it's my
community.
responsibility to keep it going. I
So a
mean,
sense of
I
community here
love that it's
then.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So, so you, because you mentioned on more than one occasion, you live out in Mobile, Alabama. Is that right?
I'm so sorry. What was that?
You live out in Mobile, Alabama?
I live in Birmingham, Alabama.
Birmingham. Sorry.
Mhm.
Sorry. Okay. So here's what I'm curious with you. I understand you were born and raised there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Born here, and my mom's from the UK, so I spent a lot of time over there and here.
Okay. So I was curious about how you don't have an accent, being from Birmingham, because I was wondering how for you, because I think you've already answered my question because you've been able to travel back and forth
Yeah.
between here and the UK. Um, if given the, because here's the thing, you do a lot of accents as well when you're
Yeah.
doing the commentating, and one of the ones I love that you do is
Mhm.
more or less like the New York accent.
Yes.
So I think you do that spot on, to be completely honest with
Thank
you.
you.
But I was curious about how you, because I don't think I realized at the time that their mother is from the UK, but I was curious how you don't have that accent at this point, because it's, and most people's ears would probably think it's pretty much a standardized American accent, but
Yes.
there's no trace of a Birmingham accent that's hinted in
Mhm.
there, because you don't come across as someone that's from there because of the
Mhm.
way you speak. So I'm actually curious for yourself how you go about that, because I'm not sure if a lot of it has to do with because you've been able to travel around and just never kept it, or if it's something that you just were able to just be able to speak that way, that was more fitting for you because it just worked out that way.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering, I'm hoping that question makes sense for you
No,
here.
yeah, no. I think it has to do with just like my mom still has her accent, and Birmingham, it's a city, so we're like kind of one of the bigger cities in the state.
Mhm.
And I grew up around people from all over. Like one of my best friends growing up, she was Russian, and um, you kind of have like a melting pot here. We have a very big medical
Mm,
science community,
okay.
so you have a lot of people that have immigrated here. And I'm trying to think if any of my friends have really Southern accents. I mean, we can all do a Southern accent if we have to. Like I can toss it out; it'll be real good. It'd be great. But it is it's not how I talk on a daily
Right.
basis. And if like you get out of the city, so like probably like you drive 20 minutes out of the city, people do have a thicker accent, but
Yeah.
not so much in the city, which I think is why I don't have one.
Okay.
But I guess I also don't have as much of a southern drawl as most people do in the city because of my mom.
Interesting. So when you've gone to the UK, then did you ever develop a English accent while you were there? If you were there for a lengthy period of time?
I would mimic the British accent. So my family lives up in like North Yorkshire,
Okay.
and I didn't like that I didn't have a cool accent. So starting very young, I would mimic my uncles and my cousins.
Okay.
Um, but I also my mom's family is Polish, so like my grandparents, my babcia and my dziadek, they spoke with very heavy Polish accents, or just a mix of Polish and English. So I got very good at also mimicking my babcia, which is where like my Polish accent comes from on stream.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my uncle would he would joke with me and we'd kind of like make fun of my babcia and like kind of mimic what she was saying in a very exaggerated way. Um, but it was never a natural development. It was more for like comedic purposes, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
But is it
Um,
accurate for the accent you pull off here? Is it pretty on point with where your relatives are from?
my Polish accent is more accurate than my British accent. I get really
Mm,
embarrassed doing my British accent
okay.
because I think like my dad would always make fun of me as a kid, so that's like the one accent that I like refuse to do normally. But
Mm,
I've been able to like at festivals here, turn it on, or I'll turn it on when I go places, and I've bumped into British people and they couldn't tell. So I'm like, I think it's pretty decent. So
interesting. Interesting. So here's what I'm actually curious about, because obviously you mentioned before that that you do open mics, or you host for open mics,
mhm.
but if I recall correctly, because there was a live stream that you did on Instagram a while back while you were in New Orleans, actually, with
Yes.
Gary.
Mhm.
And I think if I recall correctly, you had mentioned that you were thinking about going back on stage, because I was under the impression that you do stand up
Mhm.
consistently. But I think at the time when you were out in New Orleans, you kind of revealed that you were still kind of thinking about going back on stage in that
Yeah.
capacity. So how far back were you starting stand up here, and then when did you actually stop and then went over straight to the hosting side of it?
So I started in the comedy scene not doing stand up. I did a podcast with my best friend at the time. She was kind of one of the bigger female comics in our town.
Okay.
And so we started with a podcast together. I then kind of got introduced to stand-up comedy on a local sense. Like I watched it on TV. I'd go see comedians when they came through town, but I'd never done it. And so I started going to open mics, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! I love this."
Mm.
And but I didn't want to do it in a town. I didn't want to do it here the first time. So I was actually in Miami back in 2018. It was my sister's graduation, and the night before her graduation, I found an open mic um, in Coconut Grove, and I paid
I
$40
think
for
I've
an
heard of that
Uber.
place. Yeah, I think I've
Oh,
heard of
it's
that
like a
place
little strip
before.
of town. Oh,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah.
And I drove down there, did my first open mic, and I had like these jokes set aside that like some of them I have like reworked into my set now, but I got up, I did them, I did decently enough that like the comics wanted to hang out with me afterwards.
Mm.
And I think that was kind of, I was like, I like this community. I like that I can show up in a town where no one knows me. I can do an open mic and I can hang out with people for, 4 hours afterwards. So I came back, I started kind of dabbling in the Birmingham scene. Um, but I was going through like life changes, like job changes, relationship changes,
Right.
moving. And I was like, I don't have time for this. I'm not going to do it. And so I kind of shelved it. I was like, I also don't like that I'm telling the same jokes over and over and over again, because that's what comics do.
Right.
And so I shelved it. And then during the pandemic, I kind of dabbled a little bit here and there. Whenever I had a new joke, I'm like, oh, I'll go try this, see how it goes. Um, but I didn't get back into it until after I started streaming. So probably about 6, 7 months ago, I had a comic that was on, and he's this great guy. And we were talking. He's like, "Why don't you do stand up anymore?" And I was like, it's just not my thing. There's only like one mic in town right now. And he's like, "Why don't you make a mic?" He's like, "You do event coordinating, you do planning, make one." And I was like, "Okay." So the next night, had a brewery owner join a group of people that I was with. I was talking to him. His bar hadn't opened yet. I was like, "Do you want comedy there?" And he's like, "Yes." And we sat down the next day, had a meeting, and he's like, "You have an open mic now." So I spent the next 6 months preparing by getting back on stage
I
last
was gonna
week.
ask you. So I was gonna ask you, are you feeling better from the cough last week?
I feel mostly better, but I get into like one of these coughing fits a day
Yeah,
now. So I don't know when they're going to stop.
no worries. I was gonna ask you about with the streaming here now, because obviously you're doing it pretty consistently. It seems like I'm noticing more. It's just you're adding on more and more and more streaming here. So obviously you didn't answer my question before about how you like to go about with setting up a schedule here, bringing a guest on, and then
Mhm.
going about the with the streaming there. But I'm actually really curious though, because it seems like you have a lot of outlets about how you what's the best way to put it here, outlets to test out the waters, if you will, whether it be creatively or just more for the pleasure of doing the said activity. But when you're doing one thing, does it add on other curiosity for you to try other things as well too? Because that's kind of the impression I'm getting from you. Like, I like this, but I also like this as well too. So I'm gonna keep doing this, and I'm gonna keep doing that. But I like what they're doing over here too. So I'm gonna also add this as well too. So it seems like you're like tacking on so many different activities that's keeping yourself rather busy.
Mhm.
So do you ever feel overwhelmed with all that stuff that you're doing there at times, or is it just so much? Is it just kind of like a is it natural for you to go down that path because to me it seems like you really do enjoy, for the most part, I would imagine, with
Mhm.
everything that you're doing here, having to keep yourself occupied in that respect. So I'm wondering if you ever have those moments where you feel like enough is enough for right now.
Oh, that's a good one. I'll be honest, I thrive being this busy.
Mm.
My day is scheduled from the moment I wake up at 5 or 6 a.m. to when I go to bed at 1 or 2. And I love it. Um, I will say, I think being as busy as I am, it helps me keep up with everything, if that makes sense. I know it sounds counterproductive, but
Mm.
like I need to do this so that I can do this, and I need to do this so I can do this. And everything kind of helps push everything else along. But I will say, I have one big project that's in the works right now, that will be the last big thing that I'm going to be doing for a while, and I'll be making that announcement once I get approval for it, if I can.
And this is in relation to the streaming here?
It's in relation to comedy, so
Okay.
the local side of things, but it will be parts of it will be streamed. So
Got it. Okay. So so it sounds like to me from what you're kind of hinting at there that certain things you're starting to eliminate, at least maybe not permanently, but just kind of eliminate to allow you to open up other areas for you to be able to try other things here too. So it's more like what's the priority for you at that point? So that's kind of more or less the process right now for you and how you're looking at it.
yes,
More or less to kind of go out of the bang, if you will. Is that kind of
very
the
much so.
Okay.
I'll say right now, like, I don't know if you've noticed this with the stream, but like I'm transitioning away from having guest comedians on air online because we're focusing on the live shows, and then I'm bringing in more actors and directors. It's like I feel fine until those start, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
oh wait, we're still sick. This is still going on.
What is it that you're drinking though?
Huh?
What is it that you're drinking?
Black water?
I don't think I've heard of that.
It's just like water with like an alkaline pH in it. I don't know. They sent me like a case of it, and I was like, I'll try it. Sure.
So it's alkaline water, but it's flavored?
It's not flavored. It's just got like amino acids, antioxidants, electrolytes.
That's so
Bunch
funny.
of trace minerals is what makes it black.
I'm actually drinking alkaline water myself too, but yours is clearly much more darker than mine.
Yes. No, they've got I want to say they just put a whole bunch of like trace minerals in it to give it that like black color.
Really?
I was like, I'll give it a shot.
But it tastes like water?
There's absolutely no taste to it.
Really?
It's crazy. When I got it, I was like, I don't know about this. But then I was like, oh, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of you're touching on before about bringing in more guests that are more or less in the entertainment industry to kind of get their perspective on what their experience was like on the set. I mean, one of the last ones that I recall that you had was Todd Jane. Here's the thing, with Todd, I'm not certainly trying to imply that I take credit for this. That's not the case here. But I remember after after you had done Daylight Time with Gary, because I've had Todd before on my show. I sent him a message. Hey, you got to check out. I always keep messing up your name. Cult Cinema Comedy, right?
Cult Comedy Cinema.
Cult Comedy Cinema. See, I always mess it up here. So Cult Comedy Cinema. You got to check them out. You got to check Natalia because I think you'd be great on her show. So I mean, then I think I come to find out later on. I think Gary might have been involved with that as well too, if I recall correctly. So okay. So when I saw that Todd was going to be on the show, I was like, I got to watch this because I love Cherokee Creek because Todd reached out to me a while back, saying, would you be, because I'd done reviews for film as well too. And he had asked would I be interested in doing the movie, reviewing the film. And I was like, yeah, let me check it out. And that's kind of like the short version of it. But I saw the movie, like, yeah, I'd be happy to review this film for you, man. I love this. So I bought it. So the whole 9 yards. Anyways, that episode, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far, was actually one of the best ones I've seen so far that you've done here. The reason for that's because for two things. One, obviously Todd was in there as well, but the second one is because it's really your reaction. I think it's one of the things that Gary points out that he loves about you on the show is that your reaction to some of the gross factors that are in the films, the tension buildup and so on and so forth. So having Gary's like, well, you're going to see a lot of dick, like, all right. And then he's kind of setting you up for that. And then, all of a sudden we get that reveal, but I'm actually really curious about you watching certain things with people that, again, you don't know very well. Cause to me, you seem really comfortable about how you conduct yourself around somebody you've never met before and trying to build a rapport, but you may watch something that they seem rather uncomfortable for most of the people. But I think you handle that really, really well. But I'm also curious about how you actually feel at that moment. In this case, having Todd Jenkins' dick in the screen there, and you're watching, like, I'm actually watching the man that I'm talking to right now, and I'm seeing his dick on the screen right now. And I'm not saying it's uncomfortable. I'm not saying you felt uncomfortable, but I'm wondering, like, what your thought process was like in watching that, and then thinking about it after the fact and how you felt about it when you are when you think about that experience. Because to me, it seems like you had a really positive experience with that with Todd on the show and learning about the film and so on there. So I'm curious to see how your perspective on it is now with a situation like that where it's little more graphic than others in most cases
Yes.
you've come across here.
Let's do
Um,
that.
I have found that I love doing exaggerated reactions. I love doing, voices. So I've done kind of like curated, um, not so much a personality because it is me. It's just an
Right.
exaggerated version of me
Right.
when I'm watching films where it's like, oh, like, I'm watching, I watched Gremlins for the first time for a podcast that I did, and I'd never seen it. It was the first time watching it this year. Absolutely loved it.
Mm.
But when I was doing it, it was like when people watch these for the first time, they were probably like, they were younger. It was, this part of their
Yeah.
childhood. They did have that exaggerated reaction, and they're getting a sense of nostalgia through me watching it. So I'm like, I'm gonna, let out that kind of childish aspect of seeing things, like being like, oh my gosh, that's so crazy. So that's kind of
Mm.
where that aspect comes from. But in watching more uncomfortable scenes,
Right.
um, watching, I guess Todd's just the perfect example. I think at one point I did point out, I'm like, that's your dick, dude. That
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
your dick. And I am looking at your dick and
Yeah.
talking to you right now. And
Yeah.
this is insane. It's not so much a disconnect when it
Yeah.
comes to movies, but I do make a point to like point out uncomfortable things in films normally as like, this is a film. This is, with a lot of dated films, there's a lot of blatant racism
Yeah.
that I point out because I'm not going to gloss over it. And it's like, hey, we're going to point this out. We're going to acknowledge it for what it is, but we're going to move on and enjoy the artwork that's here.
Mm.
Like, you can still point it out, acknowledge it, and still respectfully enjoy the piece of work as a whole. And that's something I'm trying to make sure that I'm doing correctly, and that's something that's kind of come about with watching films. Because we've watched movies that I didn't realize had like kind of graphic rape scenes, or
Mm.
the N word gets dropped,
Yeah.
and just, and it's very shocking for me, but it's like, it's shocking to the other people watching as well. And I need to, not so much, I'm not making excuses for what happened, or the film itself, but it's like, we're going to acknowledge this, we're not going to ignore it, we're going to acknowledge it, and we're going to move on. So that's kind of how I deal with the uncomfortable situations. But like with Todd, like, that wasn't, I don't know if it's like wrong for me to be like, it wasn't uncomfortable, just seeing
No,
his
no,
dick off.
I wasn't trying to play that, because I think that's the thing, though, because because again, um, Todd made it pretty much known that what the film promotes is exactly with what you're
Yeah.
getting. So there's no hiding what the film is
yeah.
all about. He made that pretty well known to me. He's like, yeah, it's got dicks in it. I was like, all right, cool, fair enough. If you get recommended something,
Mhm.
and I think at one point it might have been with Daylight's In, if I'm not mistaken, I think you said you do some research, if I recall correctly, where you try to get an idea as far as what the film is all about, what the maybe some history behind the movie,
Mhm.
to kind of prepare for what it is maybe you want to pointing out, talk about, whatever the case may be. So if someone makes a recommendation for you and say you need to check out this film, um do you do research by looking into the history of the film, the reviews, the synopsis, among other things as well too, to select the movie and say, okay, we're going to watch it, but I'm going to save it for a guest of this sort,
Mhm.
or I might save it for myself just to watch whenever I don't have a guest on the show. So how do you go through that selection process for yourself when you're picking out a movie, and when to add a guest and when not to add a guest here, and at the same time figuring out what's going to be the best option to go about here, depending on whatever the momentum was for you at that time?
So the guest selection, with comedians, I've found that the cheesier 80s, 90s nostalgic films,
Mhm.
those that have a somewhat of a comedic undertone, those are perfect for guests, because anyone can watch, Ghostbusters, or um, Little Shop of Horrors. Anyone can watch that and participate.
Right.
Some people aren't into horror. I'll say I'm not. I like horror when I'm with people or when I'm streaming. I can't watch it by myself. I freak out.
So you really do scare that easily?
Yes,
Okay.
it's great. It's perfect for stream, because like when stuff pops out, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And I get like, jumpy, which is fun. But when people recommend movies, the research process that I have is I read the short or detailed synopsis. If it's too long, it gives too much information. I don't want it. I don't want to read it. I want the shortest synopsis. I want to know the actors in it, the budget for the film, any trivia. That's kind of our big thing as I run through like, here's who's in the movie, here's synopsis, here's the fun trivia facts. And then I look for what are they called? Like goofs in the movie. So like it's like, oh, here you can see like the boom mic, or you can see the director's, is in this shot.
Yeah.
So I can kind of keep up with those. But outside of that, I try to go in blind on all the films. I don't like reading reviews because you're always going to have that one person that's like, oh, this movie sucked. And then that other person that's like, oh, it was amazing. And it's like, who do I believe? What's going on? And so I like to make those, I don't like to make those like mental connections of like, oh, this movie's going to suck, or oh, this movie's going to be great. Like I don't look at Rotten Tomatoes. I don't look at the number of like 1-star, 2-star, 5-star reviews it has. I'm like, I'm going to make my decision about this movie on my own. And I think there's been several movies that like I've gone back and looked at that had like 1-star reviews, and I'm like, this movie was amazing. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
And it may have been amazing because of my guests that I had on and the jokes that we were making, and we were just, laughing and having a good time, or the chats talking and us again doing the same thing.
So in learning how to interact with the guests that you have on the show, and then chatting, talking to people in the chat, was it hard for you to be able to manage that, and given your attention to the chat and then watching the film, talking to the guests, watching the film, chatting, on the chat board again? Because that's one of the things I think a lot of people don't realize is actually kind of difficult to pull off, where you're watching a movie, especially a film you've never seen before, and if someone is dropping trivia on the chat, this happened in the movie, and you're watching the film, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I just missed the best part. Now I want to go rewind it, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, from what I recall, I don't think you've ever done that before, if I recall correctly. So you miss something that might have been very integral to the movie, and then because you're focusing on the chat, or you're talking to the guest, or something else happened along the way. So for yourself, how did you learn how to manage that, to be able to kind of get that balancing act figured out, or is that something you're still working on as you progress from here?
I'll say I've gotten a lot better at it. It's definitely, if I have a guest on, or a non-virtual guest, it's very much my attention mainly goes to the physical guest and the movie. And then I try my very best to make sure that I can keep up with chats. But sometimes, especially if I have, 15, 20 people talking at once, I can't keep up with chats. Like they are having conversations that I'm not a part of, which is kind of how Twitch is sometimes. But I have, you can't see it, but I have like a I have a multiple screen setup in here. So I have like a TV over here. I have dual screens here. I have my laptop, and I set everything up so it's all side by side. So the chats are next to the movie. And then I've got my, OBS system, which is what I stream out of on this. And it's like, I can glance down here if I need to. I'm constantly looking at this, constantly reading chats. And then if I have a guest, they kind of get, not like a warning before they go on, but I've got a new guest coming on Friday. And when he gets here, I'll run through, this is where you need to look. If people are talking here, you can read it, you can acknowledge it. If they're talking to you, if they're talking to each other, you don't have to. But kind of go through that, like, here are the steps, this is how it's going to go. It's very fast paced. If you can't keep up, it's fine. Because again, like I've been doing this over a year and a half. And so the time frame, or I guess not the time frame, but doing it this long has given me the skills to be able to do it.
Right.
Just a lot of trial and error, if that answers your question.
So when you watch a film, let's say if especially in the beginning where you're trying to get that balancing out worked out, have you ever gone and watched a movie again that you've already streamed, just to make sure that because I thought I liked it, but I don't remember certain things about it. So I should probably go back and watch it again just to get myself reacquainted with the film. So you ever done that for yourself as well too, after you've already streamed the movie, or you just, once you saw it, that's it?
It's kind of one of those, once I've seen it, that's it.
Okay.
But like in the last year, we've done over 300 movies. So it's one of those, like, I don't really watch TV outside of stream anymore.
Really?
So this is my allotted like movie time, is when I'm on air. But we have started slowly going back and rewatching some films that we've already done
Hmm.
that did well. And then I've rewatched some movies on live shows that I watched on stream. And then when I'm watching them on the live show, it's like, oh, I didn't see that part. Maybe I should go back and rewatch these.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just, I have such a long list of movies that I need to watch that like once I cross it off, I'm like, I'll get back to it one day.
Do you ever watch a film and you think this was so good, like I didn't think it was gonna be this great, and you connected with it and you feel like I gotta go watch it again now because I love what I saw. Like you have those moments where
Oh
those certain
yeah.
films you come, okay.
There's I think Gremlins is one, which like obviously I should have already seen that, but I hadn't. And I'm like, this is one of my Christmas movies
Should have
now.
seen that 20 years ago. No.
I know it's like it's been back there. Phenomena was a phenomenal film, and I remember my guest that was coming on. She's a local comic, and I'd sent her a list, and like I'd been sent the comedians. They get to pick the movie. I send them 3 movies, and I say pick one that you haven't seen before that looks interesting to you. And she picked Phenomena, and we both watched it, and we're kind of like, oh, this is going to be like a B movie, and it was. I remember by the end of the movie, we were both just like screaming, like, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing!" Like, and people online have been being like, "Oh, this is one of my favorite movies," and I was like, "The trailer doesn't even look that good,"
Mhm.
and then it just blew my mind how good it was, and we're actually going to be rewatching it. She's coming back on, and we're going to rewatch it on one of the live shows in a few weeks.
Awesome.
So
Do you ever feel like if I'm not sure if you have, because I'm understanding a bit better now with your selection process here, but have you ever had someone recommend a film for you, or maybe you may have picked out a film that you thought might be a good film to watch on the live streams or any of the other streams that you do, where you feel like that maybe this was not a good idea to watch this movie before you see the film, but you've already committed to, you already announced it, and then as you watch, you feel like, yeah, this was not a good idea. Anything like that comes to mind?
I'm trying to think. There have been some like dud films that we've watched, where it was like, oh, the trailer looked good.
Yeah.
I was like, this will be fun to watch, and then you get on air and you're like, oh, this movie isn't good. I think Voyage of the Rock Aliens, which is a 80s musical number about aliens that come to Earth, and there's a rock battle with some high schoolers, and then there's a giant lake monster. On paper, I was like, I'm setting up all the dominoes here. This is going to be a knockout movie. And then we watched it, and it was so terrible it couldn't be good. Which we watch a lot of terrible good movies, but it was just so bad. So
Okay.
bad my guest was just like, this is awful. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's real bad, but we have to go through to the end. We have to watch it. So there's that, and then I'm trying to think if we've had like anything other than that one. I think that's probably the worst movie that we've watched
So far.
so far. So far, it can get worse. And I hadn't seen the Alien movies before, and so
You talking about like the Aliens, Alien
yeah,
3?
yeah,
Oh, really?
I hadn't seen them. I'd seen like bits and pieces of
You got to
them, like
watch the director's cut, the ones they released. Those,
mhm,
because you have the theatrical version and then you have the director's cut. The
okay,
director cuts, because if you watch the theatrical, they're still good, with the exception of maybe 3, which, well, anyway. So, like the first two, you get the theatrical cut, they're great movies. But when you get the
mhm,
director's cut, because I'm sure you've seen director's cuts from other films where, like, what did they do different other than just adding one scene where the guy says, "Hey, how you doing?" and something to that
yeah,
effect. But having those additional scenes added to the film for those first two movies, it made the story that much better.
okay,
So if you select the version of which version to watch, stick with the director's cut because it actually fills in a lot more
okay,
with what's going on. Not that it wasn't doing well before in the original cuts, but
mhm,
when you watch, if you do go back and watch the original cuts and then watch the director, you're gonna be like, oh my god, they should have kept that the entire time, and it worked so much better than what we got before, and that was even great too. So it's kind of like a really weird thing. It's great, but this was even greater. If that makes any
okay,
sense. So
yeah,
yeah, I don't mean to take away from that, but I would
no,
suggest you watch the director's cut. That's, I think, the far superior version, and the original one is just as good, if not, yeah, just as good. I would say.
okay.
Yeah.
I will. I try to watch director's cuts when I can on my own. With streaming, I don't always have that option.
Mm.
Um, but what was I saying?
You were
Oh,
talking like, you're picking out aliens. You hadn't seen
yeah.
those.
So
Yeah.
we hadn't seen those, and it was my guest hadn't seen them either, and we made the mistake of watching Aliens first, and so we're watching the stream, and we're both like, we're that annoying friend that's just like, wait, why is this happening? What's going on? What?
Mhm.
Why are they going in there? Huh? The entire time, and we both ended, and I was just like, man, we should have waited and watched Alien first before. So I
Yeah.
think that was kind of, I think that's when mistake wise, that's the only thing is when I try to watch things out of order. But I learned my lesson with that one, and we don't do it anymore.
So is there like a is there something you will that you don't that you wouldn't watch? And what I mean by the question is this: that when someone makes a recommendation, usually it's always about like some sort of like film that is considered to be a cult classic. You know, in this case,
Mhm,
Gremlins or whatever the case may be, or maybe some obscure film that is good into depending on who you ask and how why they think it's good. Where you feel like, okay, this is probably considered a good film for us to watch in the stream, and then we'll be able to
mhm.
commenting and whatever. But is there a certain type of movie that you will not watch? Like, for example, like if someone says, "Hey, you have you ever seen The Godfather? Would you watch that movie?" Is that more like, nah, it's not in line with what the type of films we like to watch
Mhm.
for the channel here? That would be something completely separate from what we would normally be doing here. So, is there like an exception to the rule, or is there a standard set of rules that these are the type of films we're going to watch for the channel?
So I don't really have anything that I won't watch. Movie wise,
Hmm.
I do stay away from anything that has, like overly graphic, um, like war movies. I don't like war movies, and I don't like anything like I haven't watched Game of Thrones just
Hmm.
because when I started watching, I was like, "There's a lot of rape in this. I'm good. I'm gonna dip
Yeah.
out." Because I can't. I personally can't. You know, I guess host over those types of scenes. Like I will get like sucked in, and suddenly I'm just like, I'm very upset. I'm not happy right now, and like you can
Yeah.
see that on my face. With stuff like The Godfather, I would actually love to do that on stream
Mhm.
because I haven't seen it before.
Oh
Um,
my God. I saw that movie in theaters when when it was on limited release back in February of this year, because that's my favorite movie of all time, and I always dreamed of watching it in theaters. So when it was announced that it's going to be released in theaters, I think February 20 something, whatever it was,
mhm,
a friend of mine who I consider like a brother came down because I live in North Carolina. Yeah, he came down from Virginia to specifically for us to go watch the movie in theaters here in North Carolina. And I swear I almost felt like I was about to cry because I never thought I would have that
mhm.
opportunity to watch it in a theater like that. I think that's the greatest movie in the world, and I think you would love that movie too. But
Mhm,
that's one of those songs you have to pay attention to. So the less
mhm.
talking, the better, because that way you can
Yeah.
understand what's going. Because if you miss one scene, wait a minute, so why does this guy get killed? I have no idea. That's one
Yeah.
of those movies. So it's not like you can't you can't gloss over certain things and kind of catch up later. No, it picks up, and then if you're lost, you're shit out of luck at that point.
You gotta get out.
Yeah, pretty much.
No.
Yeah,
Um, no, Godfather's on the list. I think like there's just again, there's so many movies, there's so many things I
yeah,
haven't seen that I'm open to just about anything. There's some stuff that like you said, I think you're the third person that's told me like you need to watch Godfather by yourself, not on
yeah,
stream.
yeah.
It's a you time, not a movie time, and so
That
there's
in
no
part
like
two.
no rules there. My biggest thing, and it's kind of what I strive to bring with the show, is that sense of like nostalgia. So
Right.
we watched, I think it was Prehysterical. It's like a dinosaur. It's about a movie about some kids that found some dinosaur eggs. It was this
Oh, I know
'90s.
what you're talking about. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I saw that one when I was a kid.
yeah. I'd never seen it. My chats hadn't seen it, and we're watching it, but we were all talking about like how familiar and like nostalgic it felt, just because it had all of the '90s movies tropes.
Right.
And so I'm like constantly chasing that dragon, if you will, of like I need to find movies that bring that to my audience. Like that's what I want from this. That's what they enjoy. So I've got to find that and bring it. So if like, any movie has some sense of that, we'll watch it. And then of course, like, the horror genres there as well.
You
So
know, I think I'm actually really curious on how you would react to certain action movies. Like there's got to be because there's the action because the action genre is my favorite genre of all time. But there's certain action films out there that has a huge following that I'm not sure if you've seen a lot of action films, but if you haven't, I'm sure there's quite a few that you can pick out and can get your perspective, especially when you get an 80s action movie, which that was all
Oh yeah.
all this is heavy testosterone type movies, and then the 90s kind of more or less changed through the guys that were not the testosterone type of guys. You got Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze, those type of guys who were the leading man, Bruce Willis. And then now you got the new generation of action films where you have Keanu Reeves and Liam Neeson now, the older guys, which wasn't always the thing back in the day. So I'm actually curious to see how you perceive that if you were to watch it in the live stream, because I'd be curious to see how you react to the different style of action films throughout the years or throughout the decades in this case here. So you ever think about doing stuff like that as well too?
We've done a few action movies. I really want, like, I love Escape from New York, Big Trouble Little China. I don't know if those are considered action films. They're action films
more
for
or less,
me.
yeah.
We've watched some kind of B versions of those, and I love that aspect. I love I love the explosions. I love the car chases. I love, the bike chases. I love the hand-to-hand combat of stuff in those. It's just like I only have 3 days a week and there's so many movies out there. So we're like slowly kind of working through them. And those I kind of try to save for when I have a guest on. So with guests, I normally give them one horror, one like cult comedy classic, if that makes sense. So like, like UHF, Ghostbusters kind of would fall into that. And then I've been trying to give everyone like an action movie option as well. And so the guest normally gets to pick those. And then I, for myself, keep like newer movie releases, like newer horror releases, and then old black and white films. I do those by myself. So
Do you ever think about down the line if because I'm not sure what your end game is here with this because obviously you're doing this for fun and you enjoy it, but is there kind of like a goal in mind that you have about how you want to go about with the streaming platform here to be able to watch these films, engage with the audience you have, the guests you have on the show as well too? Like is there a certain goal in mind that you have about this here, or is it literally just more like, whatever the path takes me here, I'm just gonna go with the flow and then we'll see what happens in the end? Is that kind of your approach here?
um it's a bit more I think a bit more structured. My end goal would be to be doing this for streaming platforms. Like you have the option to like watch the movie, or you can watch the movie, cult comedy cinema, and it kind of meshes the two together. So kind of like Riff Tracks does with Amazon, you can watch the movie or you can watch the Riff Tracks version. And that's like the end goal for me. But right now, with kind of where this is going right now, is like I'm just going to be bringing on actors, directors, and the guests, and the goal is just to watch as much as we can and engage with the audience as much as we can. And the email that I send out to publicists when I'm reaching out, I was like, this is an opportunity for them to, whoever I'm having on, to interact with a fan base in a way that they normally wouldn't.
I'm curious about when you said that here. What's that experience been like for you when you reach out to the actor's publicist or agent, manager, whoever it may be, where when you're asking them, hey, I do this, and this is what the show's all about. I'm interested in having your client to be on the show for them to commentate on the film. Do you get a response back from them, or is it, or if you do get a response back, what that interaction is like between you and whoever is coordinating all this here? So what's that experience for you so far?
So far, I've just recently branched away from just DMing people on Instagram,
Yeah,
because I just wasn't going anywhere.
yeah.
And
I know, trust me.
with publicists, so I'm very lucky. Like my cousin works in the film industry. So I like send her my emails before I send them. I'm like, hey, how does this sound? Is this good? And I have like a different template for like publicists, managers, and kind of like the different scales of people that I would have to go through to get to the talent that I want to talk to. And so far, I've gotten some responses. I've got some things in the works, which is exciting. but it's a lot slower of a
Yeah.
process than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Because I
A lot
think
of
my
layers.
first,
Yeah.
yeah, my experience so far has been like with Gary and Todd was just like DMing on Instagram, like, oh,
Yeah.
texting, like, oh, I'm free, in 2 months' time. And I'm like, cool, this is the schedule that month. And then they like pick a date and we're good to go. And I think I've been talking right now with about 4 publicists for about 3 weeks, and we have gone absolutely nowhere. It's
Yeah.
just like, they're like, oh, we'll have to get back to you. And then it's, we're still, I'll, follow up, like, are you guys still interested? Like, if you're not, it's fine. Just give me a no. I'd much rather have a no right now, and I'll hit you guys up later. And it's like, no, no, we're interested. We're just got to, juggle stuff. And I feel like I'm jumping through holes, just
Hurdles.
like back
Yeah.
and forth.
Yeah.
Um, but I've also understand, like, I'm still very new. I'm still like growing. And so they've got to be like, who is this purple haired person that's DMing us,
Yeah. Because I trust me, I know exactly what you're going through here. But what's interesting now, though, is that a lot of times nowadays you don't have to go through those hurdles anymore, where you can actually just. But then again, I've reached out and trust me, I've reached out to a lot of people, and I see that they saw the message. Okay, so they saw it, they're gonna
Yeah,
nothing, and I'm like, oh,
nothing. Yeah.
okay, so that sucks. And it used to, I wouldn't say hurt, but it was like, oh man, it was a downer for me. I remember thinking like,
Yes.
because I really wanted to talk to this person, but it is what it is, and I don't take it personal. Um, but do you prefer going through that in this case here to develop that relationship with the representation? Because I mean, because the channel that I work with, Nerds with the World, Patrick, who is the head of the channel, he has a lot of relation with a lot of people, and from what he tells me, he has a good relation with everybody, but there is a set of hurdles that you have to
Mhm.
go through. So the manager said, this time, are you free? Good. And I've kind of had that experience as well too, not as much as he has, but I know what that feeling is like. Having to deal with that now, has your perception changed about how you may want to consider approaching it when it comes to asking guests to be on the show, or you figure that I just got to bite the bullet and ride the wave until something else works out better for me, where I can have access to said person that I want on the show.
Right now, I still feel like I'm still a little too new to decide, like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
It's definitely a change from what I'm used to, like, even with larger comedians that I've had on the show that are traveling through town. Like, it's a simple, like, I just get to DM you and you say yes or no, and you either come on or you don't. Um, I've personally been enjoying talking with people's management because it's kind of giving me, I feel like I'm making an impression with being, one, persistent about getting people on, and two, I feel like it's nice to at least have a form of communication with certain people, especially with where I want to take my show. Like, not saying that like somebody's publicist is gonna, like, I don't know what they do, like to book you or whatever, but like
Yeah.
being able to like make those connections and kind of make enough of a wave. Even if, say, this person's manager is like, no, we're not going to have you on, but I'm assuming that if I'm hitting up enough people, eventually that, there'll be a wave of people that comes like crashing back, is like, hey, we said no last time, but like we saw you had so and so on and this person on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, oh, I was talking to my buddy who's
Yeah.
this guy's manager. Like, my guy doesn't want to do it, but his guy would definitely be interested. And I feel
Yeah.
like that kind of expanding my network is,
Yeah.
within that community, is good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one thing that I started learning for myself. Actually, a friend of mine who was doing some stuff here on the channel. He reached out to a director, Jesse V. Johnson, who I'm a very big fan of here. But when he just reached out to him, he just sent him a message on Facebook, and I was like, and he said, "Hey, Jesse said he'll love to converse with us here." And I'm like, how did the first thing that comes to mind is, how did you do that? He's like, I just
Mhm.
sent him a message, and he replied. And I was like, no. He's like, yeah. You'd be very surprised how many people do actually reply back. So again, like I feel like I I I understand your perspective, and I do agree with it. But if it was up to me, I'd rather go straight to the source,
Yeah.
and say, hey, are you interested or not? And if they say no, or if they don't reply, that's pretty much a no right then and
Mhm.
there. And then maybe a year later, hey, send you a message last year. Would you still be interested?
Yeah.
No reply. So I I actually appreciate that you're making some changes, because here's the reason why I'm glad you're highlighting this here for yourself, is because to me, it sounds like that you have a bigger picture about how you want to go about. Like you found a rhythm that you are comfortable with here, but also that's in a lot of ways kind of challenging to some degree, maybe more in other areas than they are and that you may
Mhm.
have had dealt with before. But I feel like this is really where your bread and butter is at, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Okay, so and the reason why I'm pointing this out is if for anyone who's watching and listening is because if anyone were to watch to see what you do on streaming platforms, that you have a certain way that you carry yourself, you have a certain cadence you go about and how you approach these things here, that I think a lot of people may connect with as well too. And if someone else is on the show that has never done this before, and you are guiding that ship, but then allowing them to to give them room to be able to share their stories and learn about certain things along the way that obviously will educate you in that process, that's something that I think a lot of people don't realize is not an easy thing to do at certain times, because sometimes you have to figure out, okay, so he's not responding or she's not responding. How do I react to this here? What do I have to say next? So there's a lot of figuring out
Mhm.
that connection there. Unless you know right away, you guys connect, and it's just easy going from there. And I think from what I've seen so far, because I have seen some of your more earlier stuff. I'm not saying you were rough around the edges. I'm not implying that here, but I can clearly see you've gotten better along the way. So wherever you were at that time, that was the best of your ability. Then 2, 3 shows later, clearly you've gotten better in other areas that I noticed beforehand. But again, not to point out that those things you weren't that you were doing better that time weren't doing well before. It's just part of the progression. So I'm actually happy to hear you say it, because you obviously have bigger plans in mind here, where you want to take this to the next level. So I'm really happy for that, because here's what I hope would happen. And I really mean this when I say this here. I really do hope that one day someone would watch this. And I hope you're at a point at that point of your part of your life, years down the line, where someone would say, you'll be successful in that respect, where you want to take your career. And then someone watches this interview and says, at that point, you were at the very, very beginning stages of where you were trying to go for. And this is what you said about said goals. And now where you are with it now, you should look back at this and see what you said. And hopefully at that point in your life, you are in a good spot, or even if you're not in a good spot, but hopefully this conversation will be the one that will kind of like, oh my God, I can't, that would
Yeah.
be, yeah. So, um, that's kind of like the long-term goal that I have when it comes to stuff like this. And I think a lot of people don't realize too that when I tell people, I've talked to people in the industry, well, they're expecting like Tom Cruise or something. It's not
Mhm.
like that, but it's really more about the planting the seed for them to have their goal in mind, and then one day hopefully they'll be able to get to a point where they're very successful in that respect. And then I had the opportunity to speak with
Mhm.
them at that beginning part of this of
Yeah.
the life here. Um, so for me, I actually love that you shared that here, because I think that's a moment in time that I think people don't realize exists, that
Mhm.
you have opened up about. So I actually feel honored that you share that here with me, to be
Of
completely frank with
course.
you. So, but here's what I want to point out with you as well too. I don't know if you have any other plans in mind about how you want to go about and trying different avenues here, because clearly you've tried comedy, and I think you've kind of figured out what works and what doesn't work for you, and then you figured out where your strengths are at. But I'm actually curious now, that when you are as you started doing this here more often, of other things you realize that you could be doing to better yourself in the things that you're working on now, that could more or less hopefully strengthen those things that are you're good at here, but you need to try other things to be able to develop those skills along the way that you feel like are going to be very helpful in that respect there. So do you have anything in mind that you are looking at right now that you are thinking that could possibly help elevate that to a whole nother level for yourself, to be able to try something different that is so more or less in the same field, if that makes any sense?
Mhm. It does. And I have like a list of things that I'm
Mhm.
working on right now. Believe it or not, I'm not very tech savvy. So when I started streaming, everything was overwhelming. And when I started, I made myself promise, and I do this every stream. Once I like close out the stream, I sit here and I'm like, all right, what tech issues did I have today? Can I figure out how to fix them? If I can't, what do I need to do to research how to fix them so they can? And I have like a notebook that is not in here right now because I wasn't working in here earlier, but I have a notebook that I like I jot down like, this is what needs to be better next time. This is what I need to work on long term. Um, so I do that. I also am taking classes to learn how to like edit videos better so I can put them on YouTube and actually have them not have that 15-minute block of like waiting time at the
Oh
beginning.
yeah. I came
Um,
quite a few of those. Yeah.
yes, I just immediately upload those from Twitch because I sit there and I wait until I hit like a base number of like viewers before I start, which
Mm-hmm.
is normally like the 15-minute mark.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like getting that, um, I take or I ask people within my community to give me like criticism. I was like, I know that like most people don't like
No, I
would
think
be
it's a fair question
offended.
to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to ask people that, but it's like I want negative feedback. I want to know what I can do better. I know what I need to work on.
But when you
So I
mean by
do
you
that
ask
pretty.
them, are you talking about like people as far as like your friends, the people who are more or less in that same capacity as yourself, or are you talking about like the people who are joining in the chat? What do you mean by asking for
Both.
criticism? Okay.
So normally if I have a guest on after the stream, I ask like, hey, like how did you enjoy that? Was there anything that stuck out to you right off the bat? And normally they're like, no, it was great, it was awesome. But I'll hit them up
Mhm.
a couple days later, and be like, hey, like with stream, is there anything I could have done better as a host? Is there anything that like you kind of that caught your eye? And normally I don't get much, but especially at the beginning, I'd had people that were like, yeah, like I just like I felt clunky and I wasn't sure where the conversation was going. So like, and there's like an awkward pause. So like maybe as the host, you can just take the reins and just take the conversation.
Yeah.
Um, so I do that. I hate listening to myself, but I do go back and watch streams. I hate hearing my voice.
Why do you hate
Um,
that for yourself? I've met a lot of people who feel the same way. But for yourself, why do you feel that? Why do you hate hearing yourself?
I think because the voice in my head is not the voice that I hear.
Okay.
And so, or I guess the way that I hear myself, which is
Okay.
it has to do with the way like your like your facial structure and like the bones are
Oh,
connected to your
I understand
ears.
that. Okay, I got
It
you.
sounds different, and I'm
I
like,
see what
that's
you're
not
saying.
how I sound.
Yeah, I know exactly what
Um,
you mean now. Okay.
but I hate hearing myself, but I do go back and I watch rewatch videos. If something like sticks out while I'm streaming, like sometimes you can see it in frame, but I have like my phone next to me and it has like a stopwatch on it,
Mhm.
and it starts when the stream starts, and then as if something is funny or if I like did something that I felt looked awkward, I like hit lap, and then I have those timestamps that I go back and I rewatch those segments later to be like, okay, this is where we felt awkward, this is what we
Mm,
were doing, okay, let's fix this next time, like just don't make that face. Oh, this was funny, let's cut this and use this
yeah.
for advertising purposes.
Yeah.
um which that's been very uncomfortable to do, but I
Yeah.
am it's helped me get better a lot quicker, I think.
Y-
And
You know what? It's so funny you said that because so I don't know if you've ever seen the show before, but I also go back and watch the videos that I do as well too. And the reason why I do this because it's for the same thing that you do as well too. That what did I do here that wasn't so good, and so on and so forth. But a lot of times, I like when I have the videos uploaded on the channel, I have images over the conversation, so that way, if you know, if we're talking about a movie, a person, some people may know who we're talking about here. But if I have the image over there, we're talking about actor X or whatever,
yes.
then we have a point of reference for them to look. Oh, so they're talking about this guy looking.
Mhm.
So something to kind of give them to understand what we're getting into here. So that in a lot of ways that forces me to pay attention to what I've said, how I've said it,
Mhm.
and then what the questions I've asked, and so on. Um, you're actually the very first person that I've talked to that has that same method that I've pursued as well too. So I found that really interesting. But here's what I'm also curious because we were talking about this here. You're going back and you're watching yourself, and I know there's certain aspects about yourself, and I get it too, that you don't like. But because of that, though, when you realize, okay, I don't like the way that I sound, have you actually tried something different to change the way you approach, the way you speak, to be able to try something different that will be at least that would sound better for yourself? So when you go back and revisit, okay, this sounds more on point with what I want
Mhm.
to accomplish by the way how I'm projecting myself in this regard here. So anything like that for you, so that comes along?
um I think the only thing with that I've done, and it's not so much changing the way I sound, um is like there's certain words that I would like overuse when I first started.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
And when I hear, I'm like, okay, we gotta like stop that. We gotta like
Yeah,
read a thesaurus. Let's expand our vocabulary a bit. Um, so there's that, and then I for a while would have, and it still happens. Like I will like jumble up words when I'm talking too fast.
yeah, I do
Um,
too. Yeah,
and it's just like, okay, we've got to like slow down. We're just gonna take a minute,
yeah.
slow down, get the words out, and then I think the worst thing that I for me is I'm terrible with names. I'm absolutely
So am I.
awful with names. It's just
So am I.
I think I had Gary on the show, and we had Savage, the director for Purgatory Road, on, and at one point like I mixed up their names, and I was like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, this is the first time Gary had met me, and I'm like, oh, this is so terrible. And
you did that with Todd too. I remember you called him Robert.
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
And
one of those.
I
I'm
think
like,
I think it was because you saw my name on the chat because you were actually reading off
yeah,
some of the comment, and I think you saw my name, and then
mhm,
something that I posted on there, and you kept, all right, thank you, Robert, for being on the show. And I was like, Robert, I was like, I'm not even on the show. I remember reacting that way,
yeah,
and Gary's like, Todd was like, who's Robert? And you're like, oh my god. And I was like,
yeah,
oh, because there's so much going on through your head that you're
yeah,
just not putting out. Yeah, I trust me, I know exactly what you mean by that.
yeah. And it's like I always feel so terrible. So like normally what I do, and this is like for me, because it's like I know Todd, I know Gary, I know that they are different people. And it's like it's this overwhelming like information overload. Like you've got the
Yeah,
movie, I've got like a Zoom call up with my guest, I've got chats going that I'm like interacting with them, and it's I will just put like a Word document like real small, but like just have like just the name of the person that saw the show above them. So if at any point in time I'm like, it's there, I can't ignore it. It's just, I mean, it's one more thing on the screen, but it's like I have to do that because when I'm talking to, 15, 20 people in the chats, then they've got
yeah,
their names up. I'm gonna get it mixed up in my head. It's
yeah.
gonna happen. And I do it with the chats all the time. Like they laugh at me for it because there's like I've got um one of the guys that pops in his double D, and his name's Derek. I know him. He's a horror podcaster up in Seattle. But then I have another guy named Daniel, and I would like mix them up. And it's not like in my mind, I know who I'm talking to,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's like, I'm like, oh, Derek. And then he's like, it's Daniel. It says Daniel. I'm Daniel. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but it's with those situations, like taking a minute and like, because I try to like keep a pretty fast pace to keep things going. Because,
Yeah.
getting people to sit with me for 2 hours and watch a movie is,
Do you think though that if given the opportunity, where as you progress from here, that if you figured out, okay, so if this goes well, where I am able to do this, let's say in a full-time capacity here, that I could have someone that could manage certain things for me that I don't have to worry about so much. Like, would you have that coordinated and delegate some responsibilities to other people that, hey,
yes.
look at the chat. If someone points out A, B, and C, bring it to my attention and then throw it up on the screen for me to look at, and I'll respond to them or whatever the case. Like you have that kind of in place, how you would want to go about in the future if you have the ability to pull that off.
That is definitely what like the is exactly what I want to do. I still want to be able to connect with the chats because I think that's such a integral part of this.
Mhm.
Um, but I feel like if I had someone handling like the tech side, like you're handling the filming, because I mean, like I'm the camera person, I'm the audio
Yeah.
person, I'm handling everything, and it's just that part of it's overwhelming. On top of then trying to, host the show,
Your
being
favorite part of the whole setup there, right?
my favorite part, the worst part is like the main thing. And I'm if I could just like offload that to somebody else, which I've had some assistance like with my live shows. I have someone that comes in and they handle the streaming portion. So they handle the tech and then they handle chats for me because I'm obviously I have a live audience. I can't interact with the chats, but with those shows it flows a lot more for me. It's like I can focus only on being a host and like making jokes and making the audience laugh and like interacting with my guest. And like that's the dream. Is just to be able to do that. And in instances where I don't have a live audience and it is the chat, just have the chat there and not have to deal with the tech part of it.
I'm actually curious about something you said that for some reason when you were talking about this, it reminded me of this question I want to ask, which was you actually touched upon before about critiques. And sometimes you mentioned, I think earlier, you mentioned earlier that some comments can be pretty rude, and you have someone that would assist in removing that stuff to so that way you can just keep
Yeah.
focusing on other areas that won't be distracting to what's going
Mhm.
on. But as far as critiques concerns for yourself, again, this is like, so if you explain to somebody, what's your end game, what do you really want to accomplish, and you
Mhm.
explain this setup here, I want to do this, and this is how I want to go about it,
Mhm.
this is my goal, and this is how I'm doing it, I'm taking these steps here to be able to get to this goal that I have in mind. But when someone comes out and says to you that doesn't make any sense, so you want to be a TV host, or what do you, I mean, like, I would imagine there's got to be some form of critique that would come along the way, or maybe even not just from somebody you're telling this here to,
Mhm.
but on the actual chat in itself, or someone that follows with you on social media and replies to you and comments about what they felt about what they saw, and the comments that they're making, is a criticism, but the critiques they're taking on with you may come from a uh, pretty bad spot where they're
Mhm.
saying some things that are pretty mean. So for yourself in that respect, how have you handled it in the beginning? Are you not dealing with it as often, or are you dealing with it better now? Or do you, I mean, I'm curious to see how you go about it from at least moving forward from here.
Let's see. I handle if someone's giving me critique, like an actual, like, hey, let me give you some criticism on what you're doing, and it's coming from like a constructive space, I will
Mhm.
listen to it. Um, and it sounds right. Like I love criticism. It's like, oh, tell me like how I could be better. I'm a perfectionist. I want everything that I'm doing to be the best. But if somebody comes and they're just, I'm trying to think about the last person that I had to deal with. I had someone DM me on Instagram and they were just like, what's the point of this? Like, you're just talking over the movie. Like, you're just like some shitty late night TV host. And I was like, that's exactly what I am. That's what my show is. We're here to talk and laugh and bond over bad movies. Um, and I fully understand that that's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah.
But um, I did kind of take that and I was sitting with it later and I was just like, well, we did kind of go on some tangents the last two shows that had nothing to do with the movie. I was like, and while it was fun in the moment, it might not be fun for someone that's watching it that can't participate in the chats.
Yeah. Okay.
And
I
I
see what
was
you're
like,
saying.
okay. Um, but I mean, like, I recently haven't been getting a lot of criticism. I think the most common thing that I get is when I'm explaining to people, I'm like, I'm a horror hostess. And I was like, think Elvira, Mystery Science Theater, had a
Yeah.
baby. That kid ended up on SNL and got kicked off after 2 seasons. That's what my show is. I'm
That's the
gonna make you
tagline.
laugh. Huh?
That's the tagline for the
That's
show.
the tagline. Like, that's what it is. And
I love that.
I was like, this is what I do. And people here that haven't seen the show, they're just like, I could do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you it's like I don't sit there and be like, no, you couldn't. It's like,
Yeah.
okay. And they're like, I love talking through movies. I'm funny. And it's
Mhm.
I will say I think comedy has kind of helped me in that same aspect of like people all the time will show up at open mics and be like, I can do
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
10 minutes. And I'm like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. And I was like, and it's that kind of that confidence and kind of not so much, I don't think it's the arrogance that comes with like, oh, that's something easy. Like you don't do anything there. You're just watching movies. And
Yeah.
it's
It's
like,
that blind ignorance, I think, in my opinion.
yes.
Yeah.
And it's I don't take it negatively. It's just kind of one of those, it comes with it.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, like I think we're all guilty of it. Even before I started doing comedy, I'm like, I can get up there and do that. And then I got up there and did that. I'm like, oh, whew, this is
Yeah.
a lot harder than I thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I think that for me, that's kind of the worst that I get is just kind of people belittling what I do. Um, because I mean, I do pour about 20 to 30 hours into streams and to shows a week.
Yeah.
And then to, on the flip side, just have someone be like, oh, that's nothing. And it's like, okay.
Yeah. I see that perspective there. About so you earlier you were talking about how critiques about how certain people will say this is dumb, this is about you're just talking over the film and it's not even about the movie, and they kind of give critiques on that. So here's what I'm actually curious about with you, because I understand that you are very you do listen to what people are saying because you want to figure out what works and what doesn't work to kind of get the general consensus out there. But I'm actually curious for yourself about how you actually receive that criticism and actually consider what the critique is all about, especially when someone who's just saying that's just dumb, to that something to
Mhm.
that effect. Because I'm curious if someone is, let's say for example, you found something that works well for you, or you're having a guest on the show and you're talking about something, and then that one part of the conversation trails off into something else entirely different that's not nothing to do with the film at all, but it works well with what you guys are doing here. And then if you get enough people that say you guys are not talking about the movie, why are you watching the film if you're not talking about the movie, or if you're not even watching the film?
Mhm.
So I'm curious from your perspective about if you take that in consideration. Well, it was just a natural evolvement for us to be able to get from point A to point B, and this worked well for us. And other people have said they did enjoy it. But if the negative outweighed the positive in that respect, do you consider that, well, you know what, I don't care because this is what I want to do, and so far it's working for me. Therefore, I'm not going to be concerned about it unless maybe there's monetary involvement where, you know what, maybe I should consider because
Mhm.
I'm depending on this to be what it is, what I was hoping to be. So I'm curious to see how you are looking at that for yourself. If this would be able to escalate to that point where you're reaching that goal, where you are in that position where you're able to do this on a full-time basis here, but the critiques along the way that weren't there before are all of a sudden coming now. So I'm curious how you are preparing to deal with that. If you have a goal in mind that if it works, stick with it. If it doesn't work, then you'll figure it out for yourself and then move along the way from here. I hope it's not too long of a question to ask
Oh,
here.
no, no. It's so as it stands right now, the way I kind of look at it is I'm keeping the tangents. I'm keeping them in, for the simple fact of I've had guests on where we go on a tangent. And when I say tangent, it's not like 30 minutes worth of us
Right.
talking. It's like a little blip over here that has nothing to do with the movie. But I find that with people, um, you find out some things that you find hidden gems in those tangents
Yeah.
with people. It's like if we hadn't, talked about, if we had made fun of this part of the movie and that then segued over here, we wouldn't have done the U-turn that got us to the point where we found out about how you got into acting or how you got into comedy. Um, it's kind of, I guess, the podcast cast-esque portion
hmm
of the show.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm keeping them for right now. But if I get to a point where enough people are like, hey, I'm not enjoying this, or I keep an eye on like the viewership. If the viewership starts dropping during, multiple tangents, then I kind of am like, we need to kind of stay on the straight and narrow for a minute. We need
Yeah.
to get the viewership back up. And once it steadies, finding kind of a healthy balance, which that isn't always in one stream. That's kind of over the course of doing this. I found like we have a a short talking like interview. I call it like a conversational style interview at the beginning with my guests. And I found that if it goes past 30 minutes, people leave. So it's like we keep it in that 20 to 25-minute range. And I try to get as much out as I can then. And then once the movie starts, I'll allow them, but I try to keep it under 5 through the first half of the movie. And with some guests, I don't have a problem because they stay straight and narrow, and they're like, we're just going to watch the movie, make fun of it. But then I have some people that I kind of have to, like pull the reins in a bit because they want to just go off the wall the entire time.
Yeah. What's the hardest part for you about conversing with somebody on the show? Apart from just, trying to keep in line with,
Mhm.
on the film that you're watching there, but for you, what do you find is the most difficult aspect about having a conversation with somebody, apart from them maybe not being as interactive, but something else that you figured out for yourself that, okay, I need to work on this area of conversing that I didn't realize I struggled in here.
Mhm.
So,
Um, oh, that's a good one. I'm very intuitive of like the way people are feeling. And so if people are feeling like anxious, my knee jerk reaction is like, no, it's okay. Come on, get on out of your shell. Get on out here. It's fine.
mm,
Which does not work for a lot of people.
yeah.
So kind of I've made a point, like when I have guests on to begin with, just letting them know, like, hey, when I start with a show, um, my energy level is going to go from like right here to like up here, and it's going to be a lot. That's how I'm going to be. If it's too much for you, just like tap my leg. Just like let me know that you're uncomfortable, and I will do my very best to like rein it in and kind of cater to your needs. Um, which,
Do you find that to be a bit of an inconvenience in there? And I'm not saying that you're not being considered. I'm not saying that, but when I'm asking that here, I'm actually more focusing on like, dude, we have this momentum here going on. Keep up.
mhm.
You understand where I'm coming from with that here? Do
Oh
you
yeah,
have a little bit of that sentiment towards that?
it is. It's definitely something that like it's frustrating at times.
Yeah.
Um, and I think most of the guests that I have on are comedians, and it's like I see you on stage and you have this great energy, and when we're out, you're having a good time, and then like you come in here and like suddenly you're like a scared little kid, like I don't know what to do, and it's like I just need you to like get out of your shell. Like you're a performer, I need you to perform. This isn't the stage you're used to. It's a
Mhm.
new one, but it's the same thing. It is a little frustrating. And it was, I guess at first I would get like, I'd be like, why is it this hard? It shouldn't be this hard. But then I'm like realizing the first time I did a stream, I still have it. It's not up anywhere because, oh, it was so terrible. But I remember being so scared to come on air the first time. And I'm like, people are going to be watching and they're going to be doing this thing. And I think we had like 2 viewers the entire time, which was, for that was pretty crazy. But like that anxiety, I kind of have to like check myself and be like, hey, do you remember how we felt the first time we did this? And now we've got, 200 shows under our belt. Like this is a walk in the park for us, but they are still back at episode 1. So kind
Yeah.
of, I'll say for me, that's kind of one of the things that I have to check myself, especially when I'm like deciding who I'm going to book next is like, well, they didn't do good. And I'm like, they were at episode 1. We're at episode, 200. We've got to,
Do you ever do test runs? So, like, for example, like if you have a friend over and you say, "I'm going to watch a movie tonight," but then have them watch the movie with you to kind of test them out. Like, hey, I want to hear your thoughts on this movie. Let me know what you think, and then you
yeah.
converse with them. Like, do you do a little bit of that too to kind of test the waters a little bit?
So I don't do that, but I do test the waters in a different way. So, um, like I said, I used to gauge people on their stage presence, which I had to quickly realize that it's not the
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah,
Um, what I do instead is like most of what I need from a guest, I need them to be interactive with me. I need them to be able to talk to me and joke around with me. So what I do instead is if I'm in public and I'm like trying to decide if I'm going to vet somebody. I have like several comedians in the scene that keep an eye out for new people and they're like, hey, this person's good, this person's good. Um, and if someone gets vetted through kind of the support system I have, I then will like make a point to be around them a bit more and I'll joke around with them in public. And if they can, for a lack of better terms, how keep up with the conversation with me in public, I give them a chance.
interesting. Okay. Um, do you find sometimes having to go through that vetting process to be a little exhausting for yourself? Because I mean, it's a constant grind that you're going through right now, right?
Yeah.
So again, these are different avenues that you are now exposing yourself to, where before it was just me doing this, and then all of a sudden it started evolving from there and it got
Yeah.
bigger and bigger and bigger. Then all of a sudden technology, then the guests, the
Yes.
films, the conversation, okay, and then the energy levels, and then all of a sudden the chat, okay, then so there's so many things that are accumulating that you're starting to realize, wait a minute, I didn't think of this before.
Mm-hmm.
Now that I'm understanding what I must do, I got to figure out what works and what doesn't work and kind of filter that out before I can commit to, whoever I'm anticipating to possibly
Mm-hmm.
bring on the show here. Because, because it's you at this point doing it all yourself with maybe some help here and there with some people who are vetting other people on the way. Does that get a little overwhelming, possibly frustrating, where you're like, you know what, this week, no guest. It's just going to be me every single stream at this point because I can't do it with anybody else right now.
Yeah, it has gotten exhausting. Like probably the last couple months of like I've just started going back to school and like work's been a lot. I took a step back from having guests on because I think the best way to describe like comedians is like trying to book a comic is like hurting a cat somewhere. You're like, hey, I need you this day. And it's like, you get a text 30 minutes before. They're like, oh, hey, I'm real sorry. Like, I'm too high, or I, drank too much at the bar. I can't come. And I'm like, I have a show that
Yeah.
you're booked on right now. And that is one of the most frustrating things, but it's a thing across the board with all comics. They're not the most reliable.
Mhm.
And so part of the vetting process, me taking on hosting my own open mic, has actually helped alleviate some of that work and that stress, because I'm there. I know who shows up on time. I know who's not an asshole about, when they go up on stage. And I can see who's putting in the work and like wants to be there, wants to do something. And that for me has been helpful in deciding the comedians that I'll have on going forward. But I am like restructuring the show to where it's 2 solo shows a week and then 1 guest a week. And the majority of those guests will be directors, actors versus comedians.
Right.
And then I'll keep the comedians for live shows only. So
What's the most concerning thing for yourself about how things have progressed for you, that you starting to realize that again you didn't consider before, and then all of a sudden as it starts to evolve, where you realize, okay, now this is kind of uncharted territory for me, where I'm a little hesitant, a little scared, or not, maybe not scared, but just a little more reserved about how you will go about because of previous experience in certain areas where you have gotten better with your or have learned from, but you it's again it's a feeling out process. Like for you at this point right now, what's that part of yourself where you realize, okay, slow down because this is I'm not prepared for this right now.
yeah. The biggest thing, and it's not so much a slow down, it's something that I've been reluctant to do. That I'm, I guess, trying to come to terms with, is been I've kept a wall up between like my personal life and who, like, promoting myself versus promoting the show, if that makes sense. So it's always
Mhm.
been like Cult Comedy Cinema. I've been very reluctant to like post selfies on my page or like pictures of myself. And it's like on the show posters that I was doing, I was just posting like the same like 6 pictures of myself, just recycling them each show. And
Saves a lot of money right now.
yeah, I was like, this is fine. It's, it's great. But I'm friends with several streamers, and one of the things they were like, you are like, your show is you, and you have to get comfortable with, taking pictures of yourself, posting selfies, like letting people into more than just cult comedy. Because they're like, that's how you'll grow. And I'm right now kind of tap dancing along the line of, like, I'll talk about what's going on in my life on stream, but like opening up on social media in a more permanent way. Like, I've started like posting more pictures and like,
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, this is, I get more engagement here. I then get more foot traffic to the show, but that's not something I'm comfortable with. Like, I've never been one that's like, let me take a selfie, let me do this. It's,
Yeah.
um, so I think
So funny.
that,
I'm more or less the same way too. I rarely post pictures of myself on my social media accounts at all. I think the last one I did was probably like 2 years ago, from an old picture that I was promoting. I posted for an anniversary for my wife and I's marriage year. And that was like from like 10 years ago.
oh
So,
gosh.
but yeah, I don't feel comfortable doing that as well either. And it's odd because I'm in front of the camera the entire
Mhm.
time. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like it's counterintuitive in a lot of ways, which is kind of strange. But yeah, yeah, oddly enough, I understand what you mean by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's that's what I'm, I guess, struggling with right now,
Yeah.
is, and like, again, not so much like pumping the brakes on it, but like pushing myself to do it. Like, I've, like, Reels and TikTok are so big right now, and I watch them and I think they're hilarious, and I have so many ideas for like doing like a funny reel, doing something, but it's finding a way to like push myself out of my comfort zone to start making them, but also not just do trends, do something that is productive for this. So like trying to find a way to like tie the movies we've been watching into like making a reel, and then also pushing myself to make it, because it's just like, I want to do that.
Yeah. That's tough though, because I think one of the I'm not sure how you feel about social media. Like I'm kind of like I like it a lot. I don't love it, but I do like the accessibility to, like, in this case, I reached out to you through social media. So
Yeah.
I mean, I love that aspect of it where you get to talk to people directly in that respect. But it's become like a job in a lot of ways too. So if you want to be able to be successful, you have to have a good team. Like The Rock is a great example of that, where he makes a video and he's got a team of people that will, put it together, post it on the account, and then he's got like 100,000 views or 1 million views or whatever the case may be. But he obviously has a following prior to that, but it certainly does help out that you have a team of people that will do it for you in a lot of ways, um, which helps out a great deal. But when you have like someone like myself who is promoting something, and I don't get a lot of responses from the things I do post, but when I do, I notice for myself, I'm not sure if you experience it yourself too, where it's the same group of people that
Oh
are,
yeah.
that are
Oh yeah.
always responding. And sometimes I think some people don't understand that at least for me, I'm sure you feel the same way too, where it matters, but it doesn't matter, if that makes any sense. Like I'm still gonna do it regardless, but I understand that the appeal of what I do doesn't have any like value for certain people,
Hmm.
because if I'm not talking to a high caliber guest, then you're not really doing, the real thing. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I beg to differ, because how many people that I'm not gonna say who, but there are some people who host and they bring some really name value guests, and they're awful at what they do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of curated stuff, and it's like it's so generic to me personally that I don't want to approach it that way. I'd rather talk to someone who's interesting. Um, if I can get a high caliber guest, great. But then they'll say, well, because you can only get these type of guests. It's like, it's you'd be very surprised how many people who are
Yeah.
not famous at all that I reached out to and never reply back at all. In some ways, more than the famous people.
Yeah.
So I'm like, so it's not consistent across the board, but I get the perspective there. But for yourself though, I imagine that's more or less kind of the same
Hmm.
mindset that you have as well too, about how people perceive that, where this is not going to go anywhere because it's not realistic. But then anybody who has
Oh
been
yeah.
told that before has been able to accomplish, I think, in some way or shape, or their goals here. But I'm also curious about how you feel about the potential setbacks that would come with what you have in mind and what you want to accomplish here.
Hmm.
Because to me, at least from what I'm getting right now here with you, you seem comfortable in what you're doing now. But once you're out of your element and you go out, and let's say by chance, just hypothetically, you go and become more well known,
Hmm.
and people know who you are and they are fans of what you do, and they reach out to you, and now you're getting more of a following. Having that sort of attention, in my mind, at least how I'm getting it from you now, that you may not feel too comfortable with that aspect of the amount of attention that could come with that, if it were to get to that point. Because I think for me, it's not about fame, it's more
Hmm.
about opportunities, about reaching out to people who I respect and admire what they do, and try to shine a light to them, even though I'm not gonna, me bringing a guest on the show is gonna all of a sudden their numbers are gonna go up. It's obviously it's not the case,
Yeah.
but if I could see something in them that I felt that can connect with you, and then if I can see that they have become successful, then I can say I saw them at that beginning stages there, and I saw what they were saying. I'm having a real conversation with them
Hmm.
that I felt like was an honest one. And then when you see where they progress from that point on, again, that's the long term goal, where they can look back and say, yes, I remember this conversation. Then
Yeah.
it was nowhere near as good as all the other conversations I had on these other talk shows. Yeah, I would love to be back on your show. That's kind of what I hope would
Oh
happen
yeah.
along the way. So I know I'm kind of going long winded here, but for yourself, um, do you have that perception about how you would want to go about with yourself if it were to get to that point? Because I'm not sure if that's your goal in mind. I don't think it is, but if it were to get to that, how would you think you would handle yourself in that particular part of your life?
So if I don't like saying if, I'm gonna say when the show takes off. Um,
Oh, that's what I meant to say. My
no,
apologies.
no, you're good. You're good. I'm like real weird about like wording. I know it sounds stupid. I read some books. Some like it's a
Yeah, it's
thing.
like that putting in the universe out there, something like
Gotta put
that.
it
I
out
think
there. You gotta put it out the way it is.
when I get
But
famous,
no,
no.
when things take off, like, and I'll say like standing where I am now, and with, I mean, not being like I have this crazy fan base, but I mean we've got in the Discord server, I want to say like 60 or so people. And I mean, like, to me, that's like mind blowing. Like, oh my God, like
Yeah,
these,
yeah.
that's not the people that have tuned into the show. These are the people that are there enough that they're like, I want to be able to talk to you outside of the show. I want to talk with the people that tune in all the time and they, have their conversations. Um, the way that I've like, I guess the way I was raised and the way that I intend to do everything that I'm doing. A little background, like my dad owned a sound and lighting company. So you name a band during the 80s into the early 2000s, he toured with them. And I mean, like, I'm talking, like, I remember like Rolling Stones down, like you name them, he's worked with them. And so I grew up around all of these, famous musicians and actors. I mean, not actors, but I mean, sometimes, but mostly just famous musicians and famous, musical acts. And the thing that I remember taking away and the people that I remember meeting were the people that were always down to earth and willing to have a conversation and hang out and talk. And I mean, I'm talking like I'm a 5-year-old running around backstage where I have no business being. And I've got, there's a band called Third Phase. They were like a girl band that popped up.
Oh, I
And
remember
like,
that group. Yeah, I know you're talking about.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they were on like their Health South tour. And I remember hanging out backstage with the three of them. And I can't remember her name, but she was the one with the blonde hair, was like
Yeah.
dressing me up in her clothes and just being so down to earth and sweet with me. And she let me like wear one of her bucket hats to the concert. And I to this day remember it. And I was like, I want to have that level of an impact on anybody that I come across. I just want to be known as like a positive person that's just happy that anybody's there. Like the fact that anyone tunes into my show blows my mind every single time I get off stream. Like I've recently been, pushing over 100 views each stream, and it's absolutely mind blowing to me that I'm
Yeah.
like, people actually, even if it's tuning in for 5 minutes, people are tuning in and they're hanging out with me, and this is just so cool. And I want them to realize that like that means so much to me, and I never want to lose that
Do you
wherever I go.
ever do you ever reconsider about when you do the shows? Because and I'm only asking because imagine if you had because again you do your shows on weekdays, right?
Mhm.
Late at night, because that's when you're available to do that here. So obviously, in some cases, most people probably would not be able to watch it that would want to watch it, but won't be
Yeah.
able to watch it because I got to go to sleep, I got to work
Mhm.
tomorrow, so on and so forth. But then when you do it like on a Friday, where most people tend to be free,
Mhm.
but again, it's Friday, I want to go out, things of that nature. So it's kind of hard, I would imagine, for yourself to figure out what works in that regard to set up a time where you can get people to watch the show. But or do you think, you know what, I'm just that's my availability. Therefore, whoever comes in and watches, I'm grateful. Therefore, I'm just going to keep doing what I do until something else works better with my schedule that I have the ability to make the adjustments to have more people to watch the show while we're going live. Like, what's that thought process for yourself?
So I've actually over the last year tested out different times and days. Like at one point I did Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I've done Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I try to do weekend morning shows. We do like 80s cartoons and like kids stuff then.
Yeah, yeah.
I just have been too swamped to do Saturdays again. Um, but I found like especially on Saturdays and Sundays, I'm competing with the bigger streamers, the people that have, they're huge, massive followings. People are going to watch them before they're going to watch me. Um, and I found that like my numbers on Saturdays and Sundays are a lot lower than they are on the weeknights. Um, and with the, I understand my show's very late, but I've been trying to do more double features. So we start at 10 p.m. and we go to like 2 a.m. because if I go till 2 a.m., I get my British fan base starts tuning in right before work, which is really cool. So I start off with like my, so like East Coast to West Coast people are hanging out, and they kind of slowly fall off as the 5 hours go by. But then I slowly start getting my European following. They tune in, they're like, oh, I get to watch you before work, this is great. And I'm like, yeah.
Interesting.
So it's been kind of a trial and error, and I'm constantly like trying to kind of tweak when I'm going to be around. Like when I start my live shows in a few weeks, those will be like Thursday nights, and those will be starting earlier in the evening. And while I won't be able to interact with the chats, you'll still get a show. Um, so it's I test things out and try to move them around when I can, and then I also try to just do like random afternoon streams when I have time. Like I'm actually off work Friday, so during the day I'm gonna do like a game stream instead of a movie stream because I get different people that come to game streams. Then I'm
You
like,
actually
hey,
enjoy that as well, gaming, or is that
I
new for you?
it's brand new to me,
Okay.
but I do enjoy it. Like I'm playing. My cousin had like this Scooby Doo video game that I always wanted to
Oh
play,
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, yeah.
and so I play that, and I've gotten probably 5 or 6 of my consistent we're here every night stream like viewers from playing Scooby-Doo. Like they're like, oh, you do this? Oh, that sounds cool. I'll try like test it out. And then they came, they watched it, and they're like, I'm here every time.
Interesting.
So
Interesting. Okay. What about for outside of video games and movies? And have you considered trying something else that you may want to stream that would possibly be of interest for yourself, but then in hopes that maybe would garner more viewership for the platform? Like, do you have something in mind that you are could possibly
yes.
considering doing?
We're I'm currently getting all of the equipment set up. We're gonna be doing like a cult comedy cooking where I have my guests on and we
I
cook.
love that idea.
And it'll be like a pre like they'll come over, we'll cook, that stream will end, and then I'm not going to make them eat on stream, but like we'll eat and then we'll come in and we'll do the movie stream. And I've gotten like a lot of feedback from that, like people like that, they're like, yes, I want to do that. um I'm about to be traveling a good bit, so I'm going to be doing like in real life streams, like IRL stuff. So it's I'm going to pop on, guys, when I get, I'm going to visit my family in the UK, so I'm going to, you know, be over there. But I was like, I'm going to have a day in Amsterdam. I'm going to bring you guys along. And it may not be a live stream. What it may be is I make like a vlog and I post about it. I'm like, hey, like I found these sites that they, did some horror movie stuff in, or they filmed this here, and I'm going to go check it out and take pictures and bring you guys along for the adventure while I talk to strangers in a
Mm.
foreign country.
What's the most exciting aspect about the new opportunities that you're getting from you're doing this that is starting to come out more? I'm not necessarily talking about opportunities that are being presented to you, but opportunities you found along the way that you realize, you know what, this actually can be really good. I didn't think of this before. Now that I'm doing it, I'm going to follow through there. Like, what's the exciting part for you about that that part of your path, if you will?
I think the most exciting part right now, and I owe this again all to Gary, because I never in a million years would have thought an actor or director wanted to sit on the show with me, but getting to meet the people that create stuff that I love, that the viewers love, and getting to like watch it along with them. Um, like I know I've done it, but every time I like get confirmation, like, oh, this person does want to come on, we just have to schedule it. Like it's just a massive adrenaline rush. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
insane. Like,
Yeah.
oh, this is so awesome. That is a huge thing that I'm excited about. And then I'm also excited about, I'm currently working on setting up a tour to go do like live cult comedy shows around the country.
How is that supposed to work out with the tour? Like, are you doing it at comedy clubs or
At
people you're
different
visiting?
venues. So I have like a lot of connections up in New York. Um, and we're kind of like working out when it's going to happen. It probably won't be this year. We're looking towards like next year, but doing like an October run where I'm like, you know, in Atlanta for one weekend, then I'll fly up to New York, then I'll go out to Seattle, kind of, hitting
Interesting.
all the corners. Probably not all at once, but like trying my best to like get out in different places. Like I have
I
a
think it's
pretty
amazing.
heavy
That's
West Coast
amazing.
following. So I was like, I'll get out to LA and I'll do a couple shows out there, and like getting to meet everybody in person and not just their name on a screen.
How do you balance that out for you with your because I know you go to school. I'm not sure if you go to school full time, but you also work as well too. So how do you find the time to be able to balance that out to be able to pull off this touring that you want to get done here with you to be able to go to these different places for a certain period of time and then be able to go somewhere else? I'm not sure if you're doing it all within a certain time frame, or is this all going to be done sporadically for a lengthy period of time?
So it'll most likely be done sporadically for
Okay.
a length of time, but I thankfully, the company I work for, I can work remote. We do have an office here in town, and I go in probably once a week to be around people and not just my dogs.
Pick up supplies.
Yes, but it's, I like today I worked from home because I had this, and if I have like an earlier shift, I'll work from home. And my boss and the team that I work on, we're all they're very open to like making sure like, hey, if you've got stuff that you're working on outside of work, like get out, do what you got to do. We'll handle things here. Take the time off. Go on. It's, I mean, like I still have to
You're
put in my
so
40
lucky.
hours, but it's like, I'm very lucky with the company I work
Yeah.
for. And like, especially my boss has been actually the last two bosses, because I've like transferred teams since I've been at the company. They've both been so considerate and have made sure that I've needed time off when I've needed it off. So like I don't have to work late, or I never work late on nights that I have like in town shows. The latest, that I work will be 10 p.m. and they know that I can do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday because I'm going to be home until I start my stream at 10. So like she'll be good then. So I'm very, very lucky with that. And with school, it's online. So it's, my assignments I know are due on Thursday. And then I have a paper due on Sunday night. And it's like, I just have to knock it out during the week and I'm good to go.
So in doing that, what's actually the most difficult aspect about having to manage all that for yourself? Because I mean, obviously you have a full-time gig, you have a certain structure that's in place for that, but does that, in that respect, does that get a little overwhelming for yourself to be able to manage that? And then, okay, so I have my stream tonight at 10 o'clock, or is it just rather, is it pretty easy in transition because the people you work with that give you the freedom to kind of move around pretty fluidly, where you can go from one place to the next, and then I'm going to take a few hours off so I can go and do this here, and then I'm going to come right back and finish the job? Like, is that easy for you to do, or is it all kind of difficult and you're still trying to figure out how to handle that for yourself?
It was a little bit of a shock when it first started a few months ago. Like when I started streaming when I was already working. So it was a kind of an adjustment period of like, oh, we need to like get used to, working and then streaming and making sure. My biggest thing is making sure I take time to rest. The work is not the issue. It's, I will run myself into the ground till I get physically sick just because I'm a workaholic. But it's just, there's like a short adjustment period, but then it kind of like helps flow and it keeps things fresh, for a lack of better terms. Like I have ADD. I cannot just sit in a desk for 8 hours and stare at a computer screen. I have to get up and I have to move around. And so being able to have, 5 different projects going allows me to like, oh, I'm going to work on this for 3 hours and then I'm going to hop over and do this. And I'm hop back over here. Oh, and then we're going to stop. We're going to do a stream for 2 hours and then we're going to, get back and knock out the rest of work. And that's what works for me. And I understand that may just sound like I'm crazy, but being that busy and like jumping back and forth throughout the day kind of helps keep things fresh and keeps me interested in it.
How often what's your average sleep time?
Oh, a good night's sleep for me is 6 hours.
Oh my God.
Like, average night's sleep is probably about 4 hours, but I do there's normally like an hour and a half, 2 hour block window during the day in between stuff. And I will take a nap during that time. So I get
Okay.
6 hours of sleep, just not all at once.
So it's like a snack, pretty much. You just break it
Yeah,
up.
it's like it's a little appetizer before I go to bed later.
But I mean, so I don't know how long you've been doing it for that in that respect, but where you short amount of not getting enough sleep, or you do get some sleep that you may get the full 6 hours, maybe 8 hours if you're lucky. But um, is that kind of hard for you to be able to continue on with the lack of sleep that you may be getting because of the amount of things you do? Because I mean, the thing is that you mentioned before yourself that you eventually would break down, so you need the time to recoup. So obviously 6 hours to recoup is not going to be enough for you for your body to get back and up and running again. So how do you actually go about and handling yourself in that respect? Because it sounds like to me the biggest issue is that you have not the issue, but the biggest thing you have to overcome is the amount of time you actually have and how to prioritize this, and this. And now I need to get this for myself because it's for my own well-being. I'm not saying that you're not taking care of yourself, but I hope you understand what I'm getting at with that.
Oh no, my mom and I have this conversation every time she sees me. She's like, "You just look like you're not sleeping."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm not." But no, I get most weekends off, and so I refuse. I don't schedule anything. If I would decide to stream, it'll be like a last minute thing. But I take the weekends, I may like let myself sleep in, handle everything around the house, you know, hang out with my dogs more than they usually get. And then I think the biggest thing for me is it's not that I don't get enough sleep, because 6 hours, I'm fine. If I sleep more than 8 hours, I feel tired. I don't know if that's like normal, but
I've known people who are like that. Yeah.
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 So like 8 hours for me is sleeping in. But I mean, like with 6 hours, I'm like, I'm resting, I'm good, this is great. And but the thing that I struggle with is like not being able to have as much of a social life as I'm used to. Like I'm used to, going out with friends and like hanging out, but I'm streaming Monday, Wednesday, Friday nights. I have a show on Tuesday night, I have a show on Thursday night. And then like the weekends, like I don't want to go out, and get drunk at a bar. Like I want to hang out with my friends, but they're all at the bars. So kind of like finding that balance and like becoming okay with like canceling stream on a Friday night so that I can go to a comedy show has been a big
hurdle to overcome.
Big hurdle to overcome. But that, and then like when I have gotten sick, like I was sick the last 2 weeks, and
it's still trucking.
So I'm still trying to get through it. But like getting to a point where I'm like, hey, like Natalia, we can't stream tonight. I know you want to, but we can't. We need to cancel stream. Everyone will be fine. And for me, having the fan base in the Discord server, like I'll post there and I'm like, hey guys, I'm so sorry, but I'm sick. They're like, please take care of yourself. Like you're fine. We'll be okay. Take care of yourself. And that's been really helpful for me in that aspect of like the people that I'm doing it for telling me, hey, it's okay if you don't do it. Like we understand, like you put in so much work and we appreciate it. Take time, take care of yourself, like get better.
Now they get to sleep early. So
yeah, like we're going to go to bed on time. We're not going to be like short on sleep either.
Yeah. Well, so I hope you don't mind me asking this question here, but so you talked about the balancing act of your social life here. So because of the amount of work that you're doing and the amount of responsibilities you're taking on, and where you're limiting time to be around your friends and your family, I would imagine, but it seems like at least the kind of the impression that I'm getting is that you are actually getting to spend time with people when you're doing this, when you're streaming. Like, hey, I want you to be on my show, but it won't be for 3 weeks from now. Okay, let's hang out tonight. No, I got something to do tonight.
Yep.
So then I'll see you in 3 weeks. And then when they arrive, okay, so what's going to be the game plan? So you got to do this, this, and this. So there's like a certain structure that they're probably not going to be used to outside of this streaming here, where they may come to realize, I'm not sure if you had anybody come and tell you that, I was hoping we can hang out, and I'm glad we are, but there's certain things you're having me do that I should be aware of that I'm not really prepared for, which is fine. But I thought we were just going to hang out and just talk and drink and watch a movie. But it seems like you're talking here, you're looking at this, and you want me to respond to that. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, do you have a little bit of that in that respect, where you haven't seen something for a long period of time, and you bring them in, you say, okay, now do this, do this, do this, and do this.
I'll say it hasn't been, there's not so much shock when they come, but there has been a disconnect from a lot of people here, where it's like they love the show. They're like, this is so fun, this is cool, and we get to like come be on the show. Especially like before comedy kind of came back with the pandemic, they were like, this is a performance that I get to do and I get to hang out. But like the amount that I do it, they were like, yeah, you can never hang out, you can never do anything. And I'm like, yeah, but you can like be on the show. And then normally, like if they come on the show, we'll hang out for like an hour or two afterwards and like catch up. So there's definitely been I don't know if disconnect's the right word, but like what I consider what I'm doing, I'm like, I'm out here putting in the work, full time.
Right. So you're taking it very seriously, and they're probably thinking it's more like a hobby. You're just having fun, and they realize, holy shit, she's on it. So that's what I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
And it's when people have that like revelation, especially
it's almost like they don't even recognize you at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I can remember, like I had one comic that like he came over and he walks in, he's like, oh, this is professional. Like you have, this is a real thing. And I was like, yes. And he sat down and like, he's a phenomenal guy.
Sit your ass right there and don't you move until we go.
Sit there. Yeah. It was just very much just like, oh, this is real.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's kind of like it's funny when I like have newer comics on that just know me as like, oh, you host that mic and then you do this show, and I invite them on the show and then they come over, and there's about an hour pre-show where it's like they're getting to know me on a personal level. I'm asking them questions that I then will like recall on stream.
Yeah.
Um, and I tell them, I'm like, we're gonna talk. If anything like hits off well, I'm gonna bring it back up on stream. Just flow with it. Um, and it's in those moments where they realize like you can't see it, but I've got like my desk over here and I've got like this massive whiteboard and it's like work goals, like stuff I have to do for work, school
I love
stuff,
that.
whole comedy stuff. And it's like they're like, oh, you're actually doing this. You're
Yeah.
doing what I want to be doing. Okay. All right, this is awesome. And I found that I've had a lot of people start coming to me for like advice on stuff like this. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
I want to start making something like this. Can you give me some advice? And I was like doing it with all these people and then realizing like I spend like an hour of my time talking and then they wouldn't do anything. So like now I kind of vet people. I'm like, here are 3 things to start doing. When I see you doing these 3 things, then I'll sit down, I'll help you with your marketing, I'll help you with your, booking and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been the progression of all that.
So I'm curious now with yourself where because I know exactly what you mean by this here, because that's kind of some of what I've experienced for myself too. Not I don't think as much as you have, but I know what you mean by vetting out. So if someone's asking for your help and you realize, okay, so if they want my help for X, Y, and Z, I got to see that they're serious about it before I commit to helping them, because I'm not going to waste my time to say, hey, can you just let me know how you do this? And no, show me that you want to do it. Therefore, I will put in the time to help you if you
Yeah.
show me that you're serious about it here. Because if you're not, then I got other things to be doing right now that I can spend 15 minutes on rather than talking to somebody who's kind of half in,
Wishy-washy.
half out. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So in that respect, for you understanding the process and understanding how to go about it here, has that changed your relationship with any of your friends, family members for that matter, that have never noticed that side of you before, and then when they notice that you're taking it very seriously and there's a structure that you are developing to carry on with this momentum you're building for yourself here, but then they realize, oh, I just thought this was a hobby, but clearly you're taking this very seriously. But why are you taking it so seriously when it's just, you're just streaming, you're just talking? They don't understand the
Oh yeah.
full structure behind all that. But has that and again, I hope you don't mind me asking, but has that affected in any way, shape, or form your relationship, where it's either you have stopped talking to certain people who don't necessarily understand, and therefore like, oh, you know what, do whatever you want to do, whenever you're free, call me, or
Mhm.
I get what you're doing, I respect it, but I'm just not that into it, so whenever you're free, call me, or you know what, fuck this, because this is ridiculous and I'm done. So
Yeah.
anything like that?
Oh yeah. Um, I'll say I've had, for as much support as I've had like double like the negative side of it to
Yeah.
it. I have had people that have pulled away from me. I've had, which I understand, like you want someone that you can hang out with all the time. Um, I am, I mean, like I'm like surprisingly, but it's not at all surprising. Like I am single. I don't have time for a relationship.
Mm.
I've tried, it did not work. And it's just, so like that aspect I've had to like come to terms with, of like, hey, we can't date right now. If we are, it has to be someone that is equally as busy as we are. And I have yet to find that. And so there's that. And then I've had like within like friendships and like the comedy scene, there are people that what I do, I take it very, very seriously. Like business is business. And if
Right.
you were going to disrespect that, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so there's been people that have not so much like, and it's, it's not done maliciously. It's done like, oh, we're just joking around. We're just
They're
messing around.
just
It's like,
they're
hey,
disregarding the work that you're putting
yeah.
into it. Yeah, I know what you
And
mean.
it's like, in that aspect, I mean, like I had someone that, I was working with a venue to get a live show going, and the comedian, like we were all hanging out, and in front of the staff member that I was working with at the venue, they're like, oh yeah, no, she can't even do anything. Like it's just some silly thing. And it was like, they were joking, but the person that I was working with wasn't a comedian, didn't know like the dynamic that the group had. And then suddenly it was like, oh, I just lost a live show because you were treating this like a joke, like comedy, like, like something fun. And then they're like, I don't understand what the big deal is. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you do your show at home anyway. And I was like, that's not the point. And so kind of coming to terms for me with like, there's people that take, the aspect of comedy or their hobbies as hobbies. And then I'm over here like, this is what I want to do with my life.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people get that.
No, I know what you mean. So when
Yeah.
when you confront, let's say, for
Mhm.
that comedian that said that remark there, yeah, I'm sure you pull them to the side. Say, hey, don't fuck with my business here, because
Yeah.
this is something that I take very seriously. You may not
Mhm.
think I take it seriously, but you got to understand that this is something that I want to pursue. And if you can't understand and respect that, then I can't work with you in this capacity.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you do that, one, is it, was it hard for you to actually confront someone in that respect,
Mhm.
because you've known them for, let's say, for a while,
Yeah.
or you work with them in a pretty good work capacity, but to have to give it to them straight in in that regard about, you can't toy with my work here, because to
Mhm.
you it's like a joke, but to me it's very serious, and
Yeah.
I'm working hard to get somewhere with this here, and you have just burned a bridge for me because of what you said, and they took it seriously now.
Mhm.
So, like, I mean, how do you feel? How do you deal with that? And how is that relationship I'm not saying that specific one, but
But yeah,
in that respect, how does that uh, play itself out in that instance?
I'd say I have a very weird mindset when it comes to business. Like, business is, I can compartmentalize my feelings about someone on a business aspect and a personal aspect. Like, we don't get along in business, but we can be good friends.
Yeah.
And I've had friendships that like we've gone into business together on like doing events or anything, and then did not work. We got into fights, and we're like, hey, we just don't work well together, but we can still hang out and grab a beer later. Um, I have found that here recently, I don't think that that's like the norm with people. Like if I pull you aside and I'm like, hey, you messed up my business, you fucked up, you fucked me over.
Yeah.
I hope I can cuss, I'm sorry.
No, I cuss all the time, so it's
Okay.
fine.
um like I was like, you fucked me over. You're not on my show anymore. We can hang out, we'll be cool, I'll
Yeah.
still come to your stuff, I'll still support you, I will be your cheerleader for what you're doing, but you will never have anything to do with my stuff again. And this is business, it's not personal. I'm making a business decision based off of how you acted in a business setting. And I have had, oh, there's a lot of people, like, not a lot, but like there's a group of like people that I used to be very close with now that I'm like, we're good. Like, I'll still see them and I'll like talk to them, and they're just like, you're too obsessed with what you're doing. Like, you've changed since you started doing this. And I'm like, no, you just never saw me, and you never did business with me. You've never worked with me on something, and you don't like, you've always admired how hard I work. But then when you got caught up in the wheel and you were in that, the circle with me, you saw how hard I work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, like, there's that aspect of it. My family, it's kind of not so much driven like a wedge between us, but it's very much my parents and my sister, they don't reach out to like do anything. They're like, oh, you're always just so busy. And I'm like, okay, but like, you get upset that you don't see me, but you don't make the effort. And they're like, oh, because we always know you're busy. You're always streaming. You're always doing something for your show.
Yeah.
You're always
No,
doing comedy.
I know
And it's
exactly what
like,
you mean. Yeah, I know.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's, and I understand that, like, from the outside looking in, like, I have friends that like they get off work at 5 and they go out to dinner, and then they go hang out at a bar, and then they go home and they get up and they redo it, and the weekends are like just hanging out at breweries and doing their thing. And like, I understand the appeal of that like leisurely
That's
lifestyle.
changed for you, right?
It's changed. Like, it's like, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's great. Like, I'm glad that you enjoy doing that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I had like, I was like sick, and I'm like on my couch. I was like laid up for a week and a half sick, and I was like, oh, I'm like being so late. I'm just laying around watching TV. Oh my gosh, what's going on?
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's absolutely no disrespect to anybody that does that. Like, I understand the appeal. It's just not appealing to me anymore.
Interesting. So here's I hope you don't mind me asking this question here. And again, if you don't want to answer, I understand.
Mhm.
In the respects to relationships, you mentioned before that you realize that having being in a relationship with someone else is not the best thing for you right now for obvious reasons because you have a goal in mind that right now for you is a priority.
Mhm.
And I understand that as well too. But you kind of mentioned before that you were more or less, if you are going to be in a relationship with somebody, they have to completely understand your position, and they themselves more or less have to be in the same position as yourself, where you guys have the same understanding, the same mindset, and then when you guys are able to reconnect, then boom, you can carry on with
Mhm.
your relationship at that point. The question I wanted to ask you is that part of your life where you are constantly working and you do connect with people. That part I get, but there's a different side of a connection where, let's say, you don't have a partnership where you can have a shoulder to cry on, if that makes any sense. So
Mhm.
for yourself, is that something that's been that you've learned to deal with as you started to progress with what you're doing now, where you realize, okay, I know right now this is the path I'm going to take, and it's probably going to be a very lonely path for me because as I'm seeing the people that I've interacted with before don't understand what I'm doing, and then they have there's a disconnect because they don't understand, and they don't make the effort because they're just dismissing what I'm pulling off here. I would also imagine in your head too, and I felt this way for myself, is that but when I get to this point, they're going to realize, oh, hey, you're really successful. We're
Yep.
so happy for you. Thank you for for sticking to your plan. Oh, hey guys, want to come over to our house? No, 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 no. I'm
Yep.
busy right now. Oh, you haven't changed one bit. Yeah, I was always like that before I got to this
Mhm.
point here. I'm sure that goes through your head too. But
Yes.
in dealing with that side of your life where most people will probably think that you do need some companionship to kind of fill that. I guess I'm not sure this is the best way to say it, but to help provide the support system
Mhm.
in that aspect. I mean, do you think about that for yourself and how you would have to deal with that, or is this a part of your? Are you part of your? Are you at a point in your life right now where you've kind of removed yourself from that to the point where you realize it's not necessary because I've got other things that could help fulfill those areas that
Mhm.
other people may need have those areas filled with companionship where I don't necessarily need that anymore. So like I hope that the question makes sense for
Oh
me to
yeah, it
ask
does.
here. Okay.
So I will say this, like, first and foremost, I am a relationship type of person. I always have been. Um, and like I want that companionship. I want that from somebody. But I have also, like, the last relationship I was in, he worked a lot. He worked two jobs. So I was like, oh, like, you're gonna understand this. This is gonna be great. But the drive wasn't there. So like it would be like, oh, I'm off tonight. Just skip your stream and, like, we can go like hang out. And it was just like, no, 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 no. Like, I'm not telling you to skip work. Don't tell me to skip work, even though you don't consider this work. It is. Um, and so like that relationship ended, and I was just like, I need to find someone that supports my drive and is like understands it and supports it. And I was just like, I will wait until I find somebody that does that. And I'm like, when I say I'm not dating, excuse me, it's not that I'm not open to it. It's just it has to be with the right person. Like, I do go on dates in the little bit of free time that I have, and I'm like, maybe
15
I'll
minutes,
find
guys. That's all
somebody.
you get.
Yeah, like one day you get like 20 minutes. Let's go. It honestly is normally like before a stream when I have like 2 hours. I'm like, let's go grab dinner, and and then it's just like, again, it's that like leisurely lifestyle, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, but it's like, you're not gonna understand this. Like, I think the line that I always get, and it's like without fail, is like, you are so cool and interesting. You're gonna make my life so much fun. And it's like, I shouldn't be that person for you. You should be that person for you, just like I'm this person for me. And I like that carries over into like my
if
friendships as well.
if you can clarify with what you mean by that, because I think I understand with with what you meant when
Okay.
you said that. But could you clarify with what you mean by when someone says, "I think you're interesting. I like you a lot," so on and so forth. You're gonna make things fun for me.
Hmm.
When they say that, what about that turns you off about that statement? That because I would imagine their mind, they're thinking, no, you're gonna do great things, and I think it's
Yeah.
gonna help us, or it's gonna help me get the drive. But
Yeah.
so I'm curious to hear what your perspective on that is here.
So I think what turns me off from that is like a lot of times it's like people, I'm like, oh, like, what are your hobbies? What do you do? And they're like, "Oh, I just drink with my buddies." And it's like,
So you're saying dependency rather than
yes,
independence. I got
I
you.
say I can't be in a codependent relationship. I have in the past, and I was very, very miserable. And I've gone to therapy, I've gotten better. I mean, like, we're always working, but I went to therapy after like two really bad relationships where I almost where I lost myself in those relationships. And I was like, I'm not willing to do that again. But I also, when like seeing people after being in that position, when I like go out with someone, I can tell like, oh, you're gonna lose yourself in me. Like my interests are suddenly gonna become yours because you haven't established a strong sense of who you are yet.
So and hear me out when I ask this question because I'm curious about what you just said right there. Because if someone, let's say you meet a person, you meet a guy, and he says, "Hey, you figured out that okay, they're still figuring themselves out to a
Mhm.
degree, but what they're figuring out is not really about who they are as a person, but really about what they want to do with their time,
Mhm.
and they're trying various things to
Yeah.
fill their time." But if they came to you and you have a good rapport with them, and you guys get along great, that things are working well, and they said, "You know what? I love what you're doing. I want to support you. So whatever you need me to do, I'm
Mhm.
here to help you out." If they do something in that respect where they offer their services to help you out, when they have no ulterior motive, where they said, but I want
Yeah.
a piece of this, it's purely because I respect and I truly do care for what you do. And I think I found something that I want to be a part of here. And if you allow me, I will love to support you in that. And then I would think that to some degree, that would probably be a different perspective where, okay, well, let's test them out. Let's
Mhm.
see how it goes from there. So if someone were to come to you and say that, would you be a little open to that thought process? And okay, let's see how it works from
Yeah.
here. Okay.
I'll say I think I would dig my heels in at first because I'm so like I like keeping everything separate, if that
Right.
makes sense. But I have had partners in the past where like this early stages of this where they're like, oh hey, like let me help you with your graphics. Like let me help you with like video editing. Like and if nothing else, like let me show you what I know so that you can do it. And I am receptive to that. I'm a firm believer in like you don't shit where you eat. So if I'm seeing somebody, I don't want I mean, like helping me with something small with this, like graphics or, like let me video edit for you. That's one thing. But I'm very hesitant to mingle like my
Because
social circles
because
in
you
with
don't
this,
trust.
especially, yeah, like
Yeah.
trusting because it's like I have a specific, like I want things done a very specific way.
So it's got to be your way or the highway is pretty much what it sounds like
Yeah,
to me.
when it
Yeah.
comes to this,
Yeah.
until
No, I
someone's
know, and
paying me
that's what I
money.
mean by that. I don't mean to say
Yeah.
like you're being a jerk about it. I know what you
No.
mean by that, but that's the thing that I think this is the interesting thing about you that I've come to realize as we're conversing here, because quite frankly, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way when I say this here, but when you're hosting the show, I mean, I do get the impression that you are very serious about it. That part I do get, but you won't know that watching the show, what you're revealing now in this conversation here, where people don't have to understand that what some people would think of as just as a menial hobby that doesn't have much
Mhm.
merit behind it, and someone saying no, it's legit, and how this is what I'm going to do to get bigger, to get better with it, but also to make this a full-time thing where I can focus all my energy on that here. And if someone wants to tag along, it's got to be on the terms that they understand that this is a priority, and then I'll make time for them as well too.
Yeah,
And once you figured out that balancing act, of course, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
I
So
don't.
the fact that you're sharing this here, I find that extremely fascinating. And I'm telling you, 5, 10, 15 years from now, if someone comes back and says, remember when you were at the beginning? This is what I'm talking about here. Because I'm hoping to see where you are with yourself at that point and how you feel yourself at that time. And maybe you might think yourself, and I'm only joking when I say this, oh my God, what a jerk I was at the time.
Yeah. On, I will say, like, I'm so worried. I think, like, I'm just, not so much I'm worried, but like my mom and my baptist, my grandmother, she's just like, like my baptist, she's like, you need to find nice boys. We need to find you nice husbands. And I'm like, nah,
Yeah.
I'll do that later. I got time later.
Yeah.
Um, and there is part of me that's like worried, like, what if I'm taking this too seriously?
Right.
But it's very rare in my life. Like, I've had lots of jobs, like across, like had lots of very weird jobs. But like when I find something that I'm good at and that I enjoy, like one of those things is like event coordinating. Like I can throw a festival by myself. Like you want a 3-day festival, you want music acts, comedy, I got you. Let's go. You need it in 3 months, done. I can handle that level of stress and I thrive in it. And then I found this, and it was like I was not so much the stress level, but found that like spark that I found with event coordinating, and I'm like, this is my thing. This is my
Mm,
rock. I'm gonna keep it, and I'm gonna like do whatever I have to do to make it into a mountain. Like this is where I'm going with this.
I love that
And
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, I was like, this is like I've got to like roll it up this hill, and then we're gonna roll it down another hill, then up another one, and eventually it'll be a mountain. It'll be its own hill. It'll be a mountain, and like I see that in what I'm doing, and I am there's like that tiny voice in my head that's like, but what if this isn't it? What if we're being really stupid right now? And it's like I push that voice aside, and I'm like, no, like I'm gonna keep going until this
Yeah.
blows up.
I think those levels, because I know what you mean, because I've had the same doubts as well too, to some extent. But the way I see it, at least for yourself, is that I don't. I might, unless I'm wrong here, but to me, it almost seems like I'm not gonna say you don't. When I say like that, I'm not trying to come off the wrong way as I'm saying, but it seems like you don't care. And what I mean by that is that you enjoy this so much. I don't care what everyone else thinks. I'm doing this because I love it, and if they don't get it, that's their problem. But you understand the potential consequences of that. This is your sole focus, and therefore you may miss out on some other opportunities where you
Mhm.
feel like I will like also this as well too, but this is so consuming for me that I'm not saying that you're feeling this way, but I would imagine that certain points that with what I'm getting out of this here, I don't think I can get that anywhere else, even if it may be potentially a relation with somebody that doesn't understand where I'm coming from. They're not in the same
Yeah.
mindset as myself, where that's kind of
Yeah.
the potential consequence of what you're experiencing here. It's a tough thing to I think for a lot of people to understand that, because again, they're doing minimal things and they have all the time in the world to think about things, but they never were challenged
Hmm.
to understand those hurdles that a person would go through, that is taking a unique path here, but they don't understand why that path makes any sense for them
Yeah.
because it doesn't make sense for them. So yeah, I got to give you a lot of props, Natalia, because I think with what you're doing, I'm being dead serious. I think with what you're doing here, it's so it really is incredible. And whoever comes across this here that listens to your story, I really do hope that they understand what what is expected of them to be able to accomplish the goals that they have in mind. And if it means you have to separate from some people who don't get it, then that's part of the game, unfortunately. But I think it's more important to follow your path and be happier rather than considering other people's feelings and then try to make them happy rather than following your path and make yourself happy. And so I'd say you're doing I don't know if it's the right way of saying, but you're probably much, I think in my mind, you're doing the right thing here in that regard. So yeah, I give you a lot of props for that. But here's what I'm curious about as well with you, because you know, as you as things go, as things come along for you along the way, obviously I'm learning from you that you are very passionate about what you're doing, but I know you believe that you will be able to get to a point where this will be your full-time gig. This is the goal you have in mind. But does it ever concern you at any point that what happens if I don't achieve that goal? Like if
Hmm.
I don't, because I'm not sure if you have like a set mind, if you have a mindset about in 5 years I have this in mind and I plan on, and I know how everything's laid out because I can see that in order for me to do this, I have to be doing this, and it takes this amount of time for me to do it. So therefore, I have to accomplish it by this time, so I can get to this, this, and this.
Hmm.
In a lot of ways, it doesn't work that way. But I'm curious if you had that kind of mindset where you realize maybe I'm over planning things and it may not work out at all, and that might be too scary for me to realize that it may come to become a reality for me. And what will I do under those circumstances there? So maybe I should take a step back and try smaller things first before I commit to the bigger things.
So I actually that's part of the reason I'm so busy is I have safety nets set up everywhere. I have
Uh,
backup plans after backup plans after backup plans. Um, I dropped out of school the first time I went. I was a marine biology major, and I dropped out, and I was like, I don't understand why I'm like, I don't want to be in Alaska working for an oil rig. I want to like do like the humanitarian side of this. And then I was like, that's not a feasible thing. I'm not gonna make money doing that. I came back home and I actually was working in a gun store. And I worked my way up into doing their marketing and PR and event coordinating. So I never went back to school, and then like hopped around from jobs after that. And the company I'm with now, they were like, hey, if you want to go back to school, we'll pay for it. And I was like, I have enough marketing background that I never have to go to school. I have the experience required to get any marketing job I wanted. So I was like, I don't need to go to school for marketing, but I'm in operations and logistics right now. Every company out there is, not everyone, but most of the big companies, like especially like like logistics is part of everything. And there's a shortage of people in the kind of like logistics management positions, or not positions, but people to fill those. Let me go ahead and get my degree in operations logistics management, which is what I'm doing now. So I still have my day job. They're paying for me to go to school. So if, 3 years down the road, I'm still like, oh, nothing's happening here, I then have a degree I can fall back on that can, make sure
But
that I have.
do you think that'll make you happy though? If you,
Oh God, no. Oh God, no. But I've got that background there. I'm
if you,
currently working
if you don't
with
mind
a.
me, if you don't mind me interrupting, because I hope you don't, because there's something I'm really curious about this here, because I'll be honest, for myself, this is what I want to do for
Yeah.
myself. I want to do this full time. That I love doing this. I don't have any backup plan for myself about, and I have a wife and kid as well too. And I'm not saying that I'm going to be making reckless choices like, oh, I'm going to quit my job. That's not what I'm getting at. But this is what I want to do. I don't have any backup plans that, okay, if this doesn't work out, then I mean, I do have to have that for obvious reasons. But, you know, because I'm so passionate about how I'm doing this here, that I have nothing else in mind that would fulfill the same satisfaction that I get out of this here doing anything else. So for you, like I said before, I noticed that you are very much passionate about this. This is your goal.
Yeah.
This is what you want to do. But setting up these safety nets here, to me, it almost sounds like, well, if it doesn't work, then I'll do this here, but I'm not going to be happy. But I'll be complacent with it because
Mm-hmm.
it's enough to kind of get me by. But it's not going to fulfill any of these desires that I've had for such a long period of time, that I've got satisfaction doing this, that I'm not going to get out of this. So it's kind of, I had one guy tell me one time when I told him what I wanted to do, he's like, why are you doing this? You're killing yourself inside. And I was like, no one's ever told me that before. And I remember to this day that he said that to me. And I was like, I got to find something. And long story short, here I am now.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, it seems like setting up those safety nets is actually, I hope you don't take this the wrong way. Oh man, I'm trying to be careful how I say this here, but it almost, I'm
No,
going
you're
to be
good.
direct. It sounds irrelevant because it doesn't seem like you want to do that, if that makes any sense. Like, it seems like you're just doing it just to be protective, but you don't really want to do that. You're just doing it in case this doesn't work. I'll settle for this here.
Yeah.
You don't strike me as a person that will settle for anything that
No.
is going to be just enough for you to get by.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually a little, I'm actually shocked by that, to be completely honest with you. That's why I interrupted you. Like, I got to tell you this right now because I
You're
had
good.
to say it out loud. So I'm actually a little surprised with that. I get it. I understand it. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not. But
Mm-hmm.
it seems like with so much time and effort you're putting into that, your passion,
Mm-hmm.
there's still so much more you have left over that I would imagine you could still, with what you're investing in school, could all be invested into that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm hoping it doesn't come off I'm
Oh.
telling you what to do, because I'm not. But I hope you understand where I'm coming from with that there, when and you saying that and how I'm perceiving it to be, because it almost seems like a part of that's burning you in a lot of ways too, if that makes any sense. So is that kind of a fair
Oh yeah.
assessment to make?
It is, and I will say this. So the way that my brain processes that part of the safety net that I've got is like, hey, it kind of almost like lights a fire under my ass of like, this has to happen, or that's going to be us. And I do enjoy learning. I love going to school. So like, it's not, if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it.
Okay.
And, but there's that part of me is like, hey, like we have this safety net to fall back on, like logistics and operations. It's enough of a challenge that I would be interested, as long as I could like move up in a corporate ladder somewhere. Is it what I want to do? No, but I would be
Content,
content doing it.
not thrilled, but content.
not thrilled, but content. And it's just like I was like this, and I will say part of it was also like kind of a pacifier with my family of
Mhm.
like my mom does not understand this. She's like, I don't understand why you want strangers like watching you watch movies, and like I like had to explain to her when I first started
Same
streaming
reason
that
why
this
Tom
wasn't.
Cruise puts his movie in theaters, so have strangers watch him as well too. So that's
Yeah, I
all.
was like, it's fine, Mom. Like, my mom was so worried that I was doing like OnlyFans when I started streaming, and I was like, I wear clothes. I wear clothes. I'm fully clothed all the time.
Twitch and OnlyFans. Oh, it's so funny. I hope you don't mind me laughing. I think it's funny.
No, I have a full set about it. It's she like, and to this day, like when I see her, she's like, are you are you being safe? And I was like, it's not sex. It's fine. Like, and she's like, but no, people can find you. And I'm like, I have a VPN set up. I am okay. Also, who's gonna fly to Alabama to like, are they gonna knock on my door? Are they gonna get through my door? Like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And it's, you know, um, it was almost like I was like, when I decided to go back to school, I was like, I don't have to pay for it. It's free. I can take, I'm taking what's considered a full course load, which is 2 classes, but they're like condensed. And I was like, you're supposed to give 30 hours a week to it, and I'm tossing maybe 10 total. And I'm still like, I don't have no idea how, but I'm like, I have A's. I'm good. Everything's fine. And
Oh wow, that's
I was
amazing.
like, I will mentally give this time, like I will give this, the allotted 10 hours a week. But if I've told myself, I was like, if it starts cutting into cult comedy, I'm done. I will drop out, or I will like cut back to like one class. And thankfully, like I actually like when I started, I'm like, if I drop out, do I get penalized? Do I have to pay it back? And like my company's great. They're like, no, you're good. If you don't like it, it's fine. And I was like, perfect.
Oh man, because most companies would not do that. So you're
Oh, I know.
lucky. You really
I'm
are lucky with this job that you have. Like you really
so
have it
lucky.
made. Honestly, I think that's great. I'm not
It's
jealous. I think that's fantastic. So I'm happy for you on that. But man, you
Thank you.
got it
And I'll say,
lucky.
like, it took me, I kick myself every day because, like, I was nannying for a while and then, like, chopping around. And, like, right before the pandemic, like, I had people trying to get me to come work for this company. I was like, no, no, no. Like, I don't want to work for a corporate job. And then I started working there. I'm like, why? Why was I struggling for so long, like, waiting tables? Why didn't I just do this? But, it's been great. Like, I'm very lucky. And I, like, remind myself that every day. I'm like, we have, benefits are taken care of. We've got bills paid. Our job is not that hard. It's not that time consuming. Like, and great. I work with wonderful people. So I'm like, it's such a good, like, pillar cornerstone. Like, I was planning to move to New York this year, and I was like, I can move to New York and I can work for another company and do something similar, but am I gonna have this support system that's so integral on
You
the
talking about New
work
York City?
aspect? What? Yeah, like New York City, yeah.
Okay.
Because the comedy scene up there is so good.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. I'm
And
very
I was
aware
like,
of
I
it.
would have, comics that have followings on the show, and I'd be able to like grow that way. Um, but like I made the decision, I was like, I'm gonna stay here and just travel because I can, cost of living's low, my dogs have a yard, I'm comfortable. And I was like, I'm gonna stay here, stay with the company, and focus. It's allowed me to focus on this in a way that I don't think I'd be able to anywhere else, because I'd have to hustle in order to keep a roof over my head harder than I am.
So I'm actually curious about with what you just said there for two reasons here because I think if I remember correctly, it was actually a stream with Gary actually where
Mhm.
I think you made a comment about how it was so hot in Alabama and you have friends that come and visit you and they're like I'm out here because I'm burning up
Yep.
here and then you're like and why are you still living? He's like, I don't know. I asked the same question too, which kind of to me it was almost seemed like you were considering possibly moving. And obviously you more or less confirmed that here, but the thing is about with what you just said here about moving is because for example like there are a lot of filmmakers, actors that I've come across, Gary being one of them, of course,
Mhm.
but there have been a few filmmakers who have a home base in the respective state that they're at, like Oklahoma, Texas, for example, and they've got everything that, at least for the most part, everything that they need within the state to
Mhm.
be able to get the films done. And I mean, it's not easy, but it's easy for them to do because they've already done it for so long. They know how the system
Yeah.
works, so they're able to kind of move rather smoothly. Whereas before, it seems like back in the day, if you want to make it in the business, you have to go to Hollywood or New York City,
Mhm.
and then they'll send you off to these other areas that may
Yeah.
be a base more or less for the person that may work in there. But nowadays, it seems like you don't. It's not necessary to have to leave. home to go elsewhere because you can work remotely for a number of different things here. But for yourself, um, I'm curious about that decision about going to New York, because it seemed like you were going to New York because the comedy scene is great, but it can help grow the business.
Mhm.
So to me, it sounds like it was more of a business decision rather, and I hope you don't take it wrong when I ask this question here, but it seems like you're made a decision for business terms rather than personal terms, if that makes any
Mhm.
sense. Is that
It
kind of a
does.
fair assessment?
I wanted to move to New York before I was doing this. I
Okay.
was like, I want to get out of I want to get out, move to the big city. I mean, Birmingham's, a, it's a small city,
Yeah,
but
well, compared to New York, yeah, I know.
oh yeah, everything
Yeah.
is. But like, I have this like love hate relationship with this city, and it's I hate that I'm still here and I was born here, because like my mom, she came from the UK over to the US and then she settled here. My dad, came from my dad's not too far off. He was North Alabama and he came here. Um, and I feel like very fortunate to be in this city because it's a city that's going through like a growth spurt. Like in the last 10 years,
Yeah.
we've grown exponentially. We've got like more breweries than I can count. We have cocktail bars. We have James Beard award winning restaurants. And it's so many people have immigrated to this city because it's a small, big city, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah, I know what you're
everybody
saying.
knows everybody, everyone's connected, everyone's friendly. And I love that aspect of it. I just hate that I'm from here, if that makes sense.
Why is that for yourself when you have that sentiment?
I feel like I just mentally for me, I was like, I feel like I need to move away first. And then if I want to come back, that's fine. But like I want to move away and experience other things. And I've stayed because like my dad's parents, my granny and my papa were here, and I promised them I would stay until they passed. Which my granny passed during COVID and my papa had gone before her. So I was like, all right, those were the things tying me here. I can leave now. And then the pandemic hit and I was kind of like in this cage of like, I want to move to New York, like I'm ready to go. I've got, everything lined up. And then the show kind of started taking off in the way that I expected it to in New York here. And I was like, wait, we got a good job. I have two very large dogs that have been barking through this whole thing. And I was like, they have a backyard. I get to live by myself. I have everything that I need. And I have a good like support system here. I have good friends. And maybe we pump the brakes and we stay here for just a little bit longer. We see how this goes. And that's kind of like there's still that part of me that's like I want to move to like New York or LA, or Seattle. I want to get out of the South. Just there's a lot of negative connotations and you know,
I know. I
I'm
live in the South too, so trust me, I know
okay,
what you
yeah.
mean. Yeah.
And it's, and I'll say like from my standpoint when it comes to like dating or finding new friends, like finding people with the same like views as me and the same mindset, it's a little bit harder. Um, and so I'm like, it'd be easier somewhere else. And then I was like, but the people that I do have here are very quality. So I was like, maybe I should just stay. It allows me, like when Gary was in New Orleans, he was like, oh, I'll be down there. And I was like, hey, guess what? I'll come down. I'll book some comics. We can hang out. We'll get you on the show live. And he was like, perfect. And I'm like 4 hours down to New Orleans. I can go down to Mobile anytime I want. Atlanta's a 3-hour drive. Nashville's 2. Like I'm very well positioned where I am to make it to like we've got films being filmed here in Birmingham that I'm like talking with some of the actors about coming on the show. Atlanta's a big film base. New Orleans has always got stuff
Yeah,
going
they
on. So
shot
it's
Castle
like,
Falls out there too.
yeah,
One of someone worked on that film as well too, right?
yeah. My
Yeah.
friend Connor was one of the
Yeah.
henchmen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I'm kind of like coming to the realization of like, wait, what we need is here. It's gonna be a little bit harder to get, but we're not gonna have to work as hard to make the money that we need to survive. And we can put that effort into getting stuff for the show, if that makes
Right.
sense.
No, I know what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of the mindset that I have here as well too. Because I do want to make my base out of here as well because I live out in Gastonia, which is just outside of Charlotte,
Okay.
and so I remember when we first moved down because we moved from Northern Virginia. So I'm originally from Arlington, Virginia, which is like
Mhm.
a skip away from DC.
Okay.
So I've been living here for 6 years now at this point. But I remember when I first came down here, the first thing that crossed my, especially when I started doing this, like I can have everything here.
Mhm.
Charlotte's just down the road. They've shot films here. They actually shot
Mhm.
the what's the name of that actress? Jessica Chastain film where she played Tammy Faye, with
Oh,
Andrew Garfield. I forgot the name of the film, but it's Tammy Faye
yeah.
something or other. They shot that here in Charlotte. I was like, imagine if I had a base here where I could have these connections
Mhm.
and I can talk to someone in there. But again, my perception about how I want to go out slightly changed a great deal actually now that I think about it. But I realized that I just didn't want to go to the bigger cities. I've lived in New York for a while, well, a
Mhm.
long time ago. I have family who still live out there. I have family who live in Jersey as well too, which I love Jersey so much. If it wasn't for North Carolina, I'd be in Jersey. But
Yeah.
actually, if it wasn't for my wife. But anyways, the point I'm getting is that I had those intentions there, but having a home base here, I realized that you can develop a community where everything comes to you. And I
Mhm.
think that's kind of where you obviously have kind of
Yeah.
figured that out for yourself along the way because things are starting to grow here. So I'm curious now about because those things have changed for you along the way. I would imagine that other things for you have changed where because you wanted to go elsewhere. Do you still have the desire? Like I do want to leave eventually,
Mhm.
but or is it slowly kind of taking a step back where you realize, you know what, maybe I don't need to leave anytime soon.
Mhm.
I can actually settle here. But if an opportunity arises for me to do so, I would consider it. Is that kind of
Yeah.
more the lines you are with now?
Let's say there's definitely, I do still want to leave. I think
Want to.
the goal is still to leave.
Okay.
Like I said, I've got two dogs. I have an Italian Mastiff that's like 200 pounds. So the thought of moving into a small apartment somewhere, which is where I probably have to do, space wise, would just not be conducive. And it's not fair on them.
Yeah.
So I was like, Louis is 6. He's probably got another 4 to 6 years left. And I was like, I want to make sure that I give my dogs what they need to live like good, long, happy lives. And I was like, they need a yard. I need to be able to provide that. So if I'm going anywhere, there has to be some form of a yard or like a park that's easily accessible that I'm not going to have to, break my neck to get to multiple times a day. So part of my decision to stay was, I have dogs I have to take care of and they're my babies. So whatever they need, I will provide. Um, but again, like I have everything that I need here. The one thing that's kind of lacking is as far as bigger comedians go, Birmingham's kind of, you go like Nashville, Huntsville, Atlanta, you kind of skip over Birmingham. But
Mhm.
I'm lucky enough that one of my side hustles I've got is I'm working with a venue here in town, um, to start bringing bigger acts through, and other comedians in the scene are also doing it. So that kind of lack of talent that I wanted coming through the city is slowly being kind of filled up.
How are you doing that to bring bigger names on into the town? Like how what exactly are you doing to be able to generate interest from them to say, yeah, I'll consider Alabama to come out here and check this and to do a stand up
Raising,
there.
you just got to raise enough money. You have to pay
Uh,
people. And I mean, to begin with, it'll be, people will come through on their off nights. So like you'll get like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday show versus a Friday through Sunday show.
I got you.
Um,
So basically, you're reaching out to them and say, hey, we'll pay you X amount of money if you do a spot out here on a Thursday night. Uh,
yeah.
fly. Or so you would you be paying for their flights or the drive to get out here? Is that kind of along the lines you were trying to reach out to do the to give them incentive to come out?
Mhm. So normally what I do is I look at people that are coming through Atlanta, Nashville, and if they're not coming all the way down here, or if they're, driving to Huntsville and then hopping over to Atlanta, I'm like, hey, you got 2 days between Huntsville and Atlanta. Come down through Birmingham. I'll put you on a show. I'll pay you, I'll put you up in a hotel. You'll be good to go. And, just showing like, hey, there are people here that want to see comedy. There is a desire for it. And it's not the dirty. I mean, it is the dirty South, but it's not like it's not a bunch of people with no shoes on. You're fine. Come on in. Um, and kind of just sparking that interest.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, bigger acts are coming through. Like I saw Andrew Schultz a few weeks ago. I saw Taylor Tomlinson last weekend. Bill Burr was just here. Um, Gabriel Iglesias was just here. Like people are coming through. It's just getting the people, like the big people are coming through, but I want the people that are like
In the
just
middle.
under them, the one that are
Yeah.
kind of like on the cusp of like they're about to get big, they're about to blow up. Getting those people through is kind of what I want right now, and it's just a matter of networking, knowing people. Which, if you know one comedian, you're connected at least twice removed to any comic in the scene,
Yeah, yeah.
which is kind of cool.
I know what you mean. So when you, because I know this is a side hustle for you, so are you having to well, are you having to find a way to coordinate with someone to reaching out to them, to these comedians there? Are you having to go to them directly, or do you talk to the representation like manager, publicist, whatever the case may be, to reach out to them to say, hey, we have this incentive for your client to come out here? Or do
Mhm,
you just go to them directly and say, hey, we have X amount of money, we'll book you in a hotel for this period of
mhm.
time? How does that work out?
It's a mix of both. Like I said, within the comedy scene, like everyone's connected. So if
Mhm.
I know, like I have like some very good friends up in New York that are just absolutely crushing it. And so if I know that they've worked with somebody or had someone on their show or been on someone's show and they have a relationship established, I will reach out to my friend and say, hey, you know that I'll take care of them. You know that you're vouching for me. Would you let them know that I DM'd them? And normally the process is they'll let them know, be like, hey, my girl Natalia down in Alabama hit you up. She wants to book you on a show. She's going to take care of you. Um, Hit her back. And normally they'll DM me back. If they don't DM me back, and at that point, I then go through management. But comics, I mean, if you go through someone directly, they get paid more than if you go through their manager. So normally that kind of incentivizes them to just reach back out to me and be like, yo, yeah, like what's the deal? What's going on? Let's make it happen.
Okay.
Um, but it's just a lot of being connected enough that people and like people respecting the connections that you have, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
And then
So,
like,
I'm sorry, you were saying.
oh, I said it's kind of a snowball effect. Like once you get one person on, then you're just like, oh, this next person, and then the word gets out. Especially like one thing that I'm very big on is making sure that I'm paying comics not like absorbently more, but like I'm going to give you a very good price. I'm going to pay you well. I'm going to take care of you while you're here. I'm going to show you some of this Southern hospitality so that you want to come back.
I see.
So,
Okay. So here's the thing. 'Cause I think you've answered my question here because when it comes to inviting comedians out to the scene,
mhm,
for example, I came across a video with the comedian Jamie Kennedy. I'm sure you know who he is, right?
yeah.
Okay. So he did a video a while back. He didn't say where this place was, but he said that he knew somebody who had said, "Hey, can you do a gig for this location here? We're going to pay you X amount, and it's
Mhm,
going to require it's they're going to pay you based upon the amount of people who come through the door.
mhm,
So
yeah.
back end deals, right?" So he went through that whole process there, and basically, in a nutshell, he shared the story that one, the person that was supposed to be handling here wasn't there, and therefore someone else supposed to be handling wasn't even aware about how this was supposed to be
Mhm,
sorted out. And then the one person they had to go to seemed to be very dismissive because when Jamie said, "Hey, where's my money?" "Oh, you're
mhm,
famous. Relax. I'm really busy right now." To kind of be
mhm,
dismissive to them because they look at them and that you're in a pedestal and you're bitching about your money. Wait, famous person.
mhm,
So if you reach out to somebody, do you meet that kind of resistance along the way? Like, hey, I'd be interested, but I've been burned before and
yeah.
I'm not interested because of X, Y, and Z.
Mhm,
So if you come across a comedian that tells you that here, how would you go about or if you have the opportunity to be able to tell them, look, I can promise you, I will
mhm,
be the one you talk to directly. I am the link for you here. All you have to do is X, Y, and Z, and I'll make sure that ABC gets done. So
yeah.
do you have that sorted out to get that handled properly for them?
Let's see. So that's honestly a very common story when it comes, like, even like we have a comedy club here in Birmingham, and especially like local talent, they'll have to like chase the owner around. They'll be like, dude, like pay me. Like I just performed for these people. I know you have money. Pay me. So when I started like with my open mic that I have, we have a headliner and then we have like a tip out for comics. And my co-host and I, when I sat him down, he was like, oh, we don't need to do that much like comics. And I was like, no, from day one, we're gonna overpay everybody. I was like, you normally get paid 30, I'm gonna pay you 50. Like, I'm going to make sure that everyone gets taken care of. So we start off with a reputation of, oh, you want to get on that show, they'll take care of you. So those are kind of the building blocks that I'm setting now so that down the road I don't run into that. But when I have run into dealing with that for like this show with like booking comics to come to town to do this, um, I've had been very lucky with like the people that I've used to like vouch for me have been like, hey, like, like I'm not on great terms with this guy, but like this this other like comedian that we both know is, and you're tight with them, see if they'll vouch for you. So it's kind of that word of mouth vouching that helps with that. But if it comes down to like comics, not wanting to come because they're like, oh, I've been burned in Birmingham before, I don't want to come back and do that. It's kind of, I can offer you a deposit on like a percentage of what I'm going to pay you so that that I'm good for it. Or, I mean, I can't force you to come.
Right.
But what I can do is you cannot come this time, but you can, your buddies, I'm going to start booking your buddies. I'm going to book all your friends. They'll come back and tell you what a good time you had. And then you will eventually come back. You'll eventually hit my DMs up again. And that's the way I look at actors too. Like I've slid into so many DMs and I'm like, eventually what's going to happen is I'm going to get somebody and they're going to, follow me on Instagram. And then all these DMs of me being like, hey, come be on my show are going to pop up. And it's like, to me that like, I could see how that would be like, oh, I'm embarrassed. Like I didn't respond to you, but I think it's hilarious because it's just going to be like, yeah, but like I'm 2 years in, like I've gone so much farther and look at me,
Yeah.
If that makes sense. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that does answer the question, but I mean, that's the thing too, that I think, again, this is another interesting aspect about how you are approaching things here, because I've heard plenty of stories of the same thing too, where comedians are getting screwed over for one reason or another, where the money is there, but yet for whatever reason, the owner that booked them refuses to pay them, or at least refuses to pay the full amount that they were promised here because, oh, we didn't do as well as we did, but we just had a full house. Yeah, but we had to cut back on the pricing so we can bring more people in, whatever the case may be. So I'm actually curious for yourself though, on where do you start to learn to develop that mindset, that work ethic that you have, where you are understanding the value of building relationships, in not just in your personal life, but really in the work life as well too, where you understand that you don't want to burn any bridges, but you also understand that you can't screw me over in business, because if you do, you've burned that bridge for me. Mm-hmm. So having that experience, I'm wondering along the way, where did that start for you, or where you took this matter very seriously and understood that this is not a game for you, and therefore you are going to respect your time and everyone else's time, and the ones that don't respect your time and everyone else's time involved in that project has got to leave. Like, how did you develop that for yourself?
I'll say it honestly came from like watching, like subconsciously from watching my dad's business growing up. Like, again, like you name a band, he toured with them. I mean, and realizing like that we as a family had connections with these iconic people, and if you go to a restaurant, you're there a few times, you might get to know like the hostess or the waitress and you're like, oh yeah, that's a good time. But like, you're not inviting them over for dinner. You're not inviting them to like family events. And like seeing from my dad's business, the personal relationships that were established and then maintained post my dad's business, my dad, selling the business off, I was like, oh, you always gave good quality. You always my dad bent over backwards, and I grew up without him because he was off on the road giving the best quality experience that he could for every concert he put on. He was always going above and beyond, bending over backwards to the point that, it physically broke him. Like he's, just had his knees replaced. But growing up and seeing that, like that was kind of just subconsciously, like there's a level of loyalty in everything that I do. Like, and there's like a level of like, I'm only going to bring you the best quality, because if I bring you loyalty and quality, you can't say that I did you dirty. You can't say that it wasn't like what it was supposed to be. So subconsciously kind of growing up in that, I think helped create this. But I think here recently with, like I've done several like large events where I had to hire out sound and lighting crews to come out and set up stages for me, and being introduced by like, I have like a couple that worked for my dad, like a couple guys that I'll call and be like, hey, are you free? And they'd bring their teams out, and then they would call me over at certain points and introduce me to people. And they'd be like, this is the daughter of the guy I used to work for. And these guys like knew who my dad was. And like, my dad's been out of the game for like 15 years. And these guys maybe been in it for 5, but that reputation is still there and has been upheld. Like that's what I strive for. And that's what I want to do. Like, I feel like there's a certain level of respect that you can't attain unless you give that quality and that loyalty every single time, if that makes sense.
It does. That's actually a really good answer too. I think so. Have you ever felt like you kind of trailed off from that work ethic where you realize, I'm just fuck it? Have you ever had those kind of slippers before for yourself?
I have had like jobs where I worked at, um, like the gun store that I worked at. I was there for years, and I built up their events, and was booking out. I was going above and beyond for my job, and I just slowly started realizing like I'm not getting paid what I'm worth. I've asked to get paid more. I'm being taken advantage of. I brought it to the attention of everyone, and they're just being disrespectful to me. And it was one of those. My work so much didn't trail off. I just quit. If I get to a point where I'm like I can't give you the quality, I'm done.
Interesting.
And so and it's like that with every like I'll get into a job and I sold insurance for a little bit and I was like ethically I can't do this. This is terrible. I'm just calling old people all day trying to get them to switch insurance. They haven't moved their
Yeah,
car in 4 weeks. Like what am I doing?
I've heard the stories. Yeah, I know. I'm fully aware of it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's just I've I've jumped around. I nannied for a very, very long time, which I absolutely loved that. But it was one of those like I realize like, I realize when it's time to go, and I'm not going to drag it out. Um, I think I learned that the hard way, like in relationships, like holding on to stuff, like holding on to like a relationship that's not good for me because I've put the effort and the time into it,
Yeah, I know what you
and it
mean.
just got like decreasingly worse. And I was like,
Yeah.
hey, when we figure out we're not supposed to be
Yeah,
here,
so you're
we're
trying
just
to
gonna
patch up something that's still being
yeah.
broken. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
And I've definitely in recent times, not so much in like the work aspect, but in like relationships, gotten to the point where it's like, hey, like we're good. Like I recently, it was like my best friend of 10 years. Like we were kind of like we're having differences over cult comedy and like the comedy scene as a whole. And it was like I tried having constructive conversations, and I was like, hey, I love you. I wish you the absolute best. I'm gonna be cheering for you, but this isn't it. This is done. Like this is done for now. Like maybe we can revisit later, but like I'm making the business decision because we're involved with each other on a business aspect to end the personal relationship. And like I think I've grown a lot in that recently, and like recognizing when it's time to stop and
Yeah.
not letting it dwindle down to where I don't give my all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Trust me, you're speaking my language here. You know what's hard? I think for because I think you can understand this here too. Because one of the things I realized that what was difficult for me to understand was that I looked at something a certain way and I thought it was okay. Like, oh, this is good. And then I
Mm-hmm.
look back at it again. That was fucking awful. That was no good at all. And then someone else will come and say, no, it was great because they kind of look at it from a perspective that's completely separate from how you're looking at it. And then you realize, no, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, so as you progress from there, you start to notice that certain things are holding you back. And then you realize, oh, this has got to go. This is not going to be any good for
Yeah.
me, and so on. I think that's one of the hardest things that I figured out for myself. And I'm sure you can relate to this too, where you realize that how you may have handled it at that time, once you discovered that, at least for me, it probably wasn't the best way to go about it, but the point you were making was right for you at the
Yeah.
time. How I went about it, and mostly with who, but with certain people, I was like, you know what? I was too harsh, but I was right
Mm-hmm.
how I was going about it because they didn't seem to understand it and they don't see it the same way that I see it because I spent more time with this here and they're not 100% in here. So that's the part that I started to realize was not the most difficult, but it was difficult, difficult for me to understand on how to handle that better because right at that moment, it was just blowing up and say, fuck this. You don't know what you're talking about. I
Mm-hmm.
do. And you realize that's not the way to go about it because you don't want to burn those bridges either. Having come to realize when you were at that point, was it like that for you in the beginning when you started talking to certain people in your life that were more or less not in the same terms as you are, where you had those type of moments, or were you already well collected to the point where you realized I don't need to do that, so I'm going to do it like this, but then it may have escalated to the point where you realize, this guy doesn't get it, so fuck you and get out of here. Was it kind of like that for yourself to some degree?
It hasn't been so much like that. I haven't like escalated to that point. I wouldn't say like for me, especially like when I started, it was I felt like I had to like prove myself. Look at what I'm doing. Like
Yeah.
I'm putting in the work. I deserve your respect. Like let me show you how hard I'm working
Yeah.
to get the respect that I think that I deserve from you. And it was probably the first like 6 months of me doing this because it was, people were like, oh, this is cute. That's fun. Like you go have
Yeah.
fun doing your little show. And I was like, I would get so offended and upset about that. And then I had to like kind of reposition and I was like, hey, no, don't worry about these people. We're gonna keep doing what we're doing. And if they I was like, everyone will eventually come around, is what I kept
Yeah.
telling myself. And sure enough, I want to say probably in the last like 3 months, the people that were belittling what I was doing before, like I just put my head down, I kept focusing on what I was doing. I was like, I'm not gonna waste my time trying to prove to you that what I'm doing is worth it. And like the same people that were belittling me are like, they'll see me at shows now and they're like, hey, like I want to be on your show. Like I really want to be on your show because they've seen that it's established and or like
Because so
established more.
basically they see there's a form of clout that you have because
Yeah.
you've kept consistent with them. They realize, oh, wait a minute, this probably can grant me other opportunities for myself.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily an investment where they say, hey, listen, I support what you do. I would love to be part of it to continue supporting you. But it's
Mm-hmm.
more like, I love what you do. Can I be on your show so I can get more exposure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And that's the
it's
hard thing about filtering that. Well, I won't say filter it out, but to have to deal with that as well too, where people notice those things and they realize, I want to do this now. When you are dealing with that though,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's a fair question to ask, but does that put you in a bad place where I'm not saying depression. I'm not implying that here, but does it put you in a bad place where you realize, man, these guys were my friends or these guys were people that I was close with here. Why I never saw this before in them? Why are they using me in this capacity here? Whereas before they could have supported me from the beginning and I would have been there for them from the
Oh yeah.
beginning as well too. So having to see that and deal with that, like how has that made you feel? And then I know you kind of answered my question here, but moving forward with it now, it seems like you're more prepared on how to handle that better than you may have done so a certain amount of years
Mhm.
ago here. So how do you go about that now for yourself?
It's kind of, I mean, honestly, it does like mentally bring you down. So I think it was when I first started this, I was so nervous and I was, it was scary. I mean,
Yeah,
I say it's scary, like, oh, let me get on a camera and watch movies. It's scary. But
yeah,
like
yeah,
putting myself out there in that way was nerve wracking. And it was once I got kind of the itch to keep doing it, and I was like, oh, this is my thing. And I wasn't getting the support from the people around me. I was like, well, I don't understand this. Like, why aren't you're supporting, other people, but you're not supporting me? Um, and then the flips around to like, oh, I'm doing well, and it's like, hey, let me get on there. It's like
yeah,
we watch this the little red, what is it? The little red hen story. It's like we watched you like pick the wheat, grind the wheat, make the dough, bake the bread, and now we want the bread. And it's like, where were you through all these other stuff?
yeah,
And it did get to me for a while, but I thankfully have some like very, very good, like strong, supportive people around me. And we have this, one of my really good friends, he and I have this thing where we're, because he deals with it too in different aspects. We talk about, he's like, guess what? They're not going to be on the boat. And he and I have this thing. It's like when my life goal is to be able to like rent a yacht or own a yacht for, I don't know, own a yacht, rent a yacht for a weekend in Italy and like fly my friends out. Like, I don't want my friends to have to pay for anything. I want to like fly my friends out and we're like sitting on the back of a yacht, eating lobster, hanging out on a boat. Like, I want to be able to provide that for the people that I love. And like the thing that, and my friend, same mindset he has, he's like, he's like, I know the people that are going to be on the yacht with me. I know the people that are going to be on my boat. I know the
yeah,
people that I'm going to take care of. And those are the people that matter.
yeah,
And I'll say the hardest part of having that mindset is realizing that some of the people that I thought were those people for me were not.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, I deal with everything I try to deal with everything in a very business minded way when it comes to the show of like, if you're a good comedian, if we have good rapport, you can be on the show, but you're on the show on my terms. You're not coming on because you've got something going on that you want to promote. Like,
right,
unless if you were expecting me to scratch your back and you haven't been here while I'm doing this, you have to scratch my back. It's a give and take relationship. You're
Yeah.
not just going to take from me. And I feel like that's a good business choice, but it has not always been well received. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. You know what's really interesting about that though is I'm not sure. I'm wondering if you've experienced it for
mhm,
yourself, where maybe not somebody who has been negative or dismissive, but just doesn't understand,
mhm,
and they still want to be a part of that train.
yeah,
Where you go in depth with them about this is why I'm doing this here, and I'm committed to this because I want to help this grow. Because I talked to I work with NRW, and because I talked to Patrick in the past about this here privately actually, and I'm sure he doesn't mind me sharing this here, but when I first started working with the channel, well, 2 years ago I think it was something around that time. The subscription that we have on the channel was very very low. Not that we're like
yeah,
banging out numbers now, but I mean it's definitely gotten bigger.
mhm,
Bigger for ourselves. But the point I'm getting at is that I I remember telling myself that the YouTube market or YouTube, yeah, the YouTube field is oversaturated. There's gonna be a lot of channels out there, some bigger than others, and some were doing very well, where others are not, whatever the case may be. But I remember having a conversation with Patrick and telling him that I want this channel to grow. And if we can grow the numbers and get quality stuff to be able to provide for the viewers out there and then grow through all that rubble, that's a goal that I would love to accomplish there because I believe we can do that. But we need to get people that are going to be committed to that. They're going to be devoted to making great content. Patrick, who's the head of the channel here, a lot like yourself, works his ass off. Like, there are times we do a show together and he's literally like just falling asleep because he's done like 15 million things before we got to do our show, which he's either hosting or I'm hosting, someone else is hosting. And it's a balancing act where I'm like, I realize that I'm not in the same level as he is because
mhm,
what he's doing is so far ahead of me. And I'm doing certain other things that works well for me. And I'm
mhm,
focusing on that. So I'm kind of singular in that respect where he's got like 50 million things going on at once. But I noticed that as I started doing that, whoever wanted to be a part of that training, if you will say, I want to do that as well too. Okay, great. First, show me your resume and show me that
mhm,
you're committed before I can do anything for you. Because if you're not going to do that, I'm not wasting my time.
mhm,
That to me, I sort of realized it was very easy for me to just say that before I didn't know I could do that. So I'm
mhm,
wondering for yourself if, dealing with certain people that don't have any ill intentions about why they're out to reach out, why they're wanting to work with you,
mhm,
but they just don't understand the process where you understand, okay, they're not in the bad, they're not doing this to take advantage of me, but they just don't understand it. And I'm not going to waste my time with them. And then
yeah,
having to break the news to them in that respect to help them understand that there's a reason why I'm doing this here. There's a reason why I'm good at this. Unfortunately, what you're wanting to offer and what you wanted to do is nowhere near what I'm doing right now. As
mhm,
harsh as it is, but these are the facts. If you
yeah.
want to do this here, prove it to me and then come back to me. Like, do you have those type of moments as well too?
I have, I think, and it's like the way you just worded that was very interesting, and I like a light bulb just went off. Like I have recently had like a lot of people reach out, and like about getting me on podcasts and like, oh hey, and I will talk to anybody. I'm like, I will talk, we'll sit down if like I was familiar with your show, so I'm like, yes, I'll do it. But like I've had people that have like reached out, they're like, I'm a new podcaster, this is what I'm doing. And I'm like, okay, cool. Hit me up after 30 episodes. Once you've done 30, hit me up. Um, like, but I've sat down with a couple people that like they were established, and I was like, let's have a Zoom. Let me know what you want to do. If we need to prepare something, and they're like, let's do a crossover episode. And I was like, I've done crossover episodes with horror podcasters before, like right when I started out, and so they'll always have a seat at the table. But I had someone reach out recently, and they were like, we could do this like YouTube, Twitch podcast
Oh
crossover,
yeah, I
and
know what
it
you're
was
talking
this
about.
huge thing. And I was like, okay, how much time are you going to need from me? And they're like, I mean, filming will be like 8 hours. And I was like, I don't have 8 hours. And I was like, you have like 2 hour window on this day. And I don't like telling people no, because I had people that, if when I was there, someone like me was like, yeah, I'll help you out. Let's go. And so it's like, I will always do my best to give my time to somebody, but depending on how much time they get depends on where they are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting you point that out too. I always figured that those that are really committed, like for someone like as yourself, like you're putting in the work, you're putting in the time and effort, you wouldn't necessarily go, and I think I'm in the same boat as well too, where, hey, can I do this here with you so I can learn or I can do so I can grow from it? Like, it's like the way I see it for myself, and I'm sure you see it for yourself as too, is that if I'm putting on content, I got to make sure it's to the best of my ability, works well for me. So if I do, like I do reviews from the channel as well too. I remember in the beginning, I was horrible. I was awful. And I cringe. I'm like, I got to delete this shit. But I never realized, no, I'll leave it there because that way when I look back and say, I've clearly gotten better. I'm not saying I'm great, but I'm gotten better. But I noticed that in order for me to do something, I have to find something that works for me and do it very, very well with whatever limited things I have available for me to pull this off. So this is kind of a makeshift thing here, which my wife set this up here, but that's going to be taken down. And when I did the first episodes, and it was in one of our other rooms where the backdrop was horrible, and I told my wife, I don't like this backdrop. We'll use the one we have in our room. And I was like, it's going to be a bunch of, no one's going to care for that. The first guest I had that saw that, she's like, oh my God, it's amazing. Okay, good. I'm keeping it.
Yeah.
And
No, I've been like admiring it this entire time.
Yeah. So, but again, like that's kind of an accident there. When I realized it worked, I kept it, and it's been pretty consistent across the board since then. I also do my reviews here as well too. But I noticed that I have to put in the work, and if I need help, what would I ask for help for without disturbing someone else who's be very successful, which won't take away from their time, because I'm not going to ask, hey, can I be on your show because I want to know how you do your stuff, and I'm like, no, I should figure that out for myself.
Yeah.
And the one thing that's worked well for me, and I think I know for a fact you commented, is where I've done research. That's one of the biggest things that's helped me out, where I do a huge amount of research on something, so that way I can avoid asking the same questions again.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing I don't want people to come back. Hey, so what was it like growing up as a kid? You should already know that by now, because they've already been doing this for X amount of years. You should have already researched that. Find something else to ask them.
Yeah.
That's how I perceive it. That's why I noticed a lot of guys who are so successful, they ask the same goddamn questions so tell me how you got into the business here. Dude, look up the videos that have a 3-minute conversation about that. That answers all your question there. You don't need to ask those questions again. That to me is important.
Yeah.
For me, it's worked. And that's what I really, okay, this is my bread and butter. That's where I realized, okay, this is what I'm good at. So I don't mean to take away from you. I hope you don't mind that I rambled on here, but for yourself though, again, when you're dealing with somebody who is wanting to get better at what they're pursuing here, again, I understand. I think that you are looking at and see, where are they at and what's their approach, so I know exactly how to dedicate my time to them. And the thing is that what I don't want people to misunderstand here, because I think some people who would watch this here and look at this, and they may hear it and they say, oh, she sounds so pretentious. And I'm like, no, I don't think so at all. I think it's all about the timing, and timing is very important. We don't have a lot of it. So therefore we have to prioritize what's more important. If someone's going to want to do a job, do something that's going to take away from our time, just to help them out when they're not prepared, which I've dealt with on more than one occasion, it's a waste of time. So we know to prioritize. So when you see that in someone who's trying to put in the effort for yourself, what's considered the threshold that, okay, if you do X, Y, and Z, I will invest back with you?
So are we talking about like cult comedy or like me going on other shows? Because there's two separate things here.
Well, so let's start off with cult comedy, for example. Okay. So because cult comedy is your bread and butter. So I'm curious to see how someone is approaching you and say, I want to do your show because of this.
Yeah.
And you kind of explain what the threshold is, but for someone else who is more or less up and coming there, who's starting to figure things out and they realize this is what they want to do, what's your process to vet them out and say, okay, if you really want to do this here, this is what you need to do?
Yeah. For me, it's looking at the quality and the content that they already have put out. Like if I see that you're being consistent, and it's the passion and that drive is there and it's been there, and like, I'm not going to expect someone like, you have to have been podcasting for a year. Like when I threw out 30 earlier, that's just kind of like I just need you to have a base.
I remember thinking to myself, I'm so glad I went past 30 at this point.
But I mean, and I fully understand, like I'm sitting here like saying 30 as someone that in like a year has done again like over 200 episodes, and I understand like that is it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's one of those like I look at what you're doing, I look at the passion that you've got. Are you being consistent with it? Do you have stuff already in the pipeline that's going to be pushing out before, during, and after whatever I do with you? I think like a good example is there's this comedy group here in town. They're called Laugh Garden. They're a comedy variety show. So they do like music, comedy, and they have like vendors set up. And I'm very good friends with both of the girls. And one of them, she's started comedy at like 16 years old. She's a prodigy. She's amazing. And she came to me and she was like, hey, I need help with marketing. And I want to do stuff with cold comedy. And I was like, okay, all right. I was like, first things first, let's get you on the show. And she showed up to my show and I told her, I said, don't watch the movie. Don't write any jokes. Just show up. You don't have to do anything. And she showed up with a notebook of jokes and she'd watched the movie 3 times the night before. She's like, I'm ready. And I was like, you've got the drive. Like you want to be here. You're putting in the effort. Okay. And I mean, did the show go the way it was supposed to? It did not, but we got her back on the next time. She did so well. And so like I saw that she was being respectful. She was doing her best to go above and beyond to be respectful of me and my time and like the show. And I kind of took that to heart and like it stuck with me since the first time that she was on the show. And then she came up she was like, I want to do a crossover with my show and your show. Like I want you to come do your show live at our venue. And like, you know, we'll all do our comedy before, we'll do the show, and then the band will come on afterwards. And we tried to do it a few months back. It didn't happen. So we were actually doing it in a couple months. But I'm on the sidelines watching her put in just as much work into her show that she doesn't do one every week, but she does like one or two a month. She's putting in the same amount of work into that show that I see myself putting in here. And so for me, seeing someone else mirror the drive and the work ethic is what I look for when someone comes to me to ask for help or like comes to do a crossover. It's like, hey, because I've had people come and be like, hey, I want you on my show. Like, it'd be great. And it's like, okay, cool. You're just starting out. I would love to be one of your early guests, but I need you to like solidify exactly what you want from me. Because I've had people like, yeah, you'll just come on and we'll just like talk and like we'll just do our thing. And it's like, you don't have anything prepared. You don't have a structure yet. I need you to find that structure and find your thing. And then I'll come do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that. So as you go through this here, have you ever gotten people look at you and say, wow, you are so conceited with what you're doing right now. You're just so full of it. Like, do you have that kind of
Oh
response from
yeah.
people? Okay.
It's normally when people ask to be on the show, and it's mostly with comics. It's like, if you're new to the scene, I've seen you a couple of times. The conversations we've had haven't gone that well. And it's one of those like, I'm going to pump the brakes. I'm not saying no to you, but we're going to, we'll wait. And it's people will approach me and it's like, hey, I'm not booking right now, or I'm not doing this. And sometimes when you tell certain people no, they're just like, oh man, fuck you. And it's like, wow, I said not right now. And they're like, you're too proud of this. And I'm like, I've poured so much of my time and energy into this. Like, I am proud of it and I'm protective of it, because I've had people on that, I don't drink when I'm doing the show normally unless I'm by myself, but like I've had comics come on and just get like blackout belligerent drunk and just, mess up the show for the evening. And it's one of those like, I can't have that. And I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that I never run into that again. And whether that means me being a little bit more protective and guarded, I understand that.
It's I won't say it's a tough act to it's a tough balancing act. I think if it's really important, you're gonna protect no matter what, is how I see it. And I think that's one of the hardest things that a lot of people don't understand that. And again, like I've talked before about on more than one occasion where people ask me, oh, you talked to people in the entertainment industry? Yeah, I do. I talked to quite a few, but they're expecting like, who have you talked to? They're gonna want to hear someone in the likes of like Gary Oldman, Brad Pitt. Like, well, I don't talk to those guys. I've talked to Louis Mandylor, Jesse V. Johnson, Gary Kearns. Like, who the fuck are those guys? Like, well, you ever seen this movie? Like, yeah, I've seen that movie, but that guy was, you mean the guy was in the back? Like, that's how they kind of perceive it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, well, the thing is that it's, I don't, and I'm not using them to be dismissive when I say this, but it's about putting in the reps. It's about putting in the work, and they have to offer something, as pretentious as it may sound, that's going to be interesting for me to want to delve into. That's why I do my research. What have they said in the past? I'll be honest with you, I think I might have told this to Gary too. Hope if he's watching, I'm sure he'll understand where I'm coming from. So I was actually interested in talking to Gary. I was looking up some interviews he's done in the past. What I came to realize at the time was that the interviews, and I won't say which ones they are, at least not on air, but they were very boring. They were not very interesting at all. And Gary, bless his heart, was answering the questions, but it was kind of like very dry in a lot of ways. Again, this is not a slight on Gary by any means, but I just remember thinking like, oh my God, this is not
I think I know
good.
one of the interviews you're talking about, because it was one that I watched. I was like, what is this person asking him?
Yeah. So I remember I even talked to my kids. Like, I really want to talk to this guy, but I don't like how this interview is going at all. And he's like, well, just ask him anyways. Like, I don't know. And then I came across one thing where it was Gary more or less kind of doing an interview. I think it might have been with Luke Albright. I can't remember who it was. But when he was doing the interviewing, he was on point. He was full of energy. He was very entertaining. He had a lot of personality. I was like, where the fuck was that guy in that interview?
Yeah.
I go back and watch the interview again. So because I do go back and dig in deeper. And then I knew it, but I didn't pay attention because I was focusing on Gary. And I was like, oh my God, they're asking the same, forgive me for saying this here, same stupid ass questions where, tell me where you grew up. So you grew up in South, why did you want to become an actor? And then I saw another interview was more or less the same thing too. And there was another interview about a film he was doing. We'll say which one it was, but it was just boring. It really, really was. And I was like, I'm not watching any more of this stuff here.
Yeah.
So again, my work ethic in that regard is don't do those things again. So I watch a lot of bad interviews. I was like, okay, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. But watch a lot of good ones. So do this, but make sure it works for you before you do it. So my son will probably walk in the room and hear me talk to myself because I'm actually articulating, how can I ask this question like this?
Yeah.
It's a lot of that as well too. I don't think a lot of people realize that you got to find out what works for you. Okay. You're actually the longest I've actually had a conversation with somebody on the show, minus the bathroom breaks, but otherwise it's the longest one I've had here. So, but it's actually a really good one too, because I'm not sure how you feel about this here, because I'm actually really curious to get your perspective, because since you do a lot of vetting, and I was actually going to ask you about that here, because when you started talking about how you were vetting other people to be on the show and vetting other people to work with, and you do a lot of filtering out to be able to work with someone that's going to be respectful of the time and put in the work and so on. And if it doesn't work out, obviously it's going to be a genuine on genuine terms, right? Okay, it didn't work out, let's move on. But I was actually curious now, because and I hope you don't mind me asking for myself on this here, when you had said yes to me, was it because you had saw something that I had done that made you realize, okay, I can talk to Robert here? Or did Gary put in a good word to say talk to him? Or I'm curious to see what it was that made you agree to allow for you to be able to talk to me under these circumstances here.
Well, I'll say Gary and Todd both spoke very highly of you.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, all right, we're good. And I think it was after seeing you in the chats, like, because after the show ends, like I normally talk to them for a few more minutes, and both of them brought you up after you'd been in the chats. And I was like, all right, dope. Okay, this is somebody. And so like I had watched, I want to say like a couple snippets of some of your stuff. Like when you like DM'd me, I like got on YouTube and I was like, we watched these. Okay, let's see how how this is going. I was like, okay, so you've got a good roster of people. It's not all just dudes. We're cool. Yeah. Which you laugh at, like that's the thing. Like I was on a podcast very recently that I was their first female guest. They've been doing it for like 2 years. And I was like,
yeah.
They're like, we just don't know how to talk about girls. And I was like, what do you think I'm gonna do? Talk about my period the entire time? Like, it's fine, guys.
Yeah.
So, but no, I think it was very much like people that I had vetted and were like, I guess like in my circle were receptive and positive about you. So I'm like, okay, this person is you're not a
Okay.
creep. Let's go.
Well, shout out to both Gary and Todd, because
Yeah.
they were actually great. They're a really great group of guys.
Oh yeah.
I have a lot of respect for what they do, and respect as a person as well too. So I appreciate that they vetted me out in that respect, to put in a good word. Well, so here's what I'm curious about yourself now, and I hope you don't mind me jumping into a completely different set of topics here. So now that you're watching more and more films, has your perception about movies changed along the way that maybe you probably didn't consider before? And then as you're watching the films more consistently now, especially films that most people may consider to be not so good,
Mm-hmm.
you look at a movie a certain way, you realize, you know what? I understand why this film works. Maybe it wasn't up to quality in terms of, like, say, like in this case, let's say The Godfather. It's not that same type of level in terms of quality, but I do see certain things that they were going for that made me respect and appreciate the movie because of what they're pulling off here. Clearly, there was limitations, and they did the best they could, so I give them credit for that. Or do you just kind of look at the films for what they are and then move on to the next one?
So I definitely, like, in one of the, like, the pre-movie ramble that I do, I say ramble, I go through like the movie specs. So I talk about who the director was, the actors and actresses in it. If I can find out if it's like somebody's first film, I'll toss that in. So it's like, oh, this actor, they're new. And then we always talk about the budget. And I'm like, hey, this is a, $10,000 film in the 80s. Last week, the one that we watched was $150,000 in the 80s. Yes, a lot of the budget for the 150,000 went to cocaine, but it also went to the production value of this. And so I mentally do take note of all that. And I'm like, oh, like bigger cast, like higher, bigger actors for the time, bigger budget. But I've watched movies that like had all of the stones to be something great, pale in comparison to this indie film that we watched the next night.
Yeah.
So like I definitely have started like kind of picking up on, I guess, more appreciating the films themselves more as pieces of art versus movies, if that makes sense.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
And I also, I think, like, and Gary's, I think, was one of the first people that pointed this out to me. Like, I'll point out, like, oh, the lighting's really nice there. Oh, I love this shot. Like, oh, the way that like the camera's like zooming in during like this actor's monologue is like, it's very ominous, and it's foretelling something in the film. Like, this is crazy. And I'm noticing like I pick up on that a lot easier now. Like normally, like when I first started doing this, it was just like a movie was something to just unwind with. And now, movies, it's not something that
It's like you're
unwind with.
picking up a sixth sense in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
It's
what
like
you mean.
I've watched so many films. It's like, oh, I can like see like the quality here. I can see what they were trying to do here. Oh, they're doing this because this actor or this director's favorite movie is this movie, and they did it in this film like 10 years prior.
Yeah.
And it's, being able to kind of connect those dots in like the web that is film it's very interesting and kind of fun to do.
There's quite a few people that I've talked to now in the industry where I know the work so well at this point that I can pick out, oh, so this is more like this director's movie because I've seen the film so often that they have a certain trait about them that's pretty consistent across the board, with some minor differences, of course, here and there. That's which is standard. But I won't say what director it was because I actually had a conversation with them earlier today. But I noticed something in the movie that stuck out for me that I felt like didn't work. So I brought it to, so the director knew what I was talking about and pointed out to me what had happened. I won't go into specific because it's actually in reference to a film that I did review, but basically pretty much the bottom line was that the money people wanted this, so therefore I had to add that. And I'm like, oh, so because it didn't seem consistent with what you've done before. Because again, I've been able to pick up on certain beats that they have along the way. And quite surprisingly, a lot of people don't notice those things. So that's why a lot of people are very dismissive about when they look at a movie. Oh, the movie sucked. Like, what about the movie sucked about it? What is it about the film that sucked? It was awful. In what way? And that really does bother me. To this day, it still bothers me when people are very dismissive like that, because I invest a lot of time in films. I've never directed a movie, but I know it's not easy.
Oh yeah.
So, so when I hear you talk about the film, and that's what I say, I've noticed you've gotten better along the way, because the way you talk about a movie from when I first saw the one episode, I think it was from like last year, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more, maybe less than that, probably that. What you said about, I forgot what movie it was that you said about that film, up to Cherokee Creek, and what you've done recently here, night and day, because
Oh
your
yeah.
commentary is completely different, because there's a certain understanding, and you point out those things that you mentioned before. That to me is how I honestly want to change that, the perception of how do people look at movies, which is why I'm a fan of what you do, because you're coming from a neutral position where I've never seen this stuff before. I've felt like I should have, now that I am watching it, and you have that the eye-opening experience, like, oh my God, I'm so surprised I never saw this before. And that's always a joyous thing for a lot of filmmakers like myself, who are like, oh my God, this person loves it. I know that feeling. And, so there's a lot of personal connection in that respect. So as you're going through watching films now, does that make you more of a film lover as a result of that? Or were you already a film lover before, but probably just kind of like casually liked films when you ever get a chance to watch, or love movies, but now that you're committed to it in that respect, that you have a much more higher amount of love for it than you probably did beforehand?
Say, I grew up as a Blockbuster kid, so like every Friday night we'd go, like, I was like, after school, we'd like done good in school, we got like Blockbuster night. We go, I get to like pick 2 movies for the weekend. My sister would get 2, my parents would get theirs. And it's like I grew up loving, I've always loved film. I have really bad anxiety, so I would always rewatch the same things
Like which
over
ones?
and over and over again. And because it was like, like, this is comforting. I'm just gonna keep, I know what's gonna happen. Even if it's like a scary part in the movie, it's gonna be fine at the end. So I've always loved film in that aspect, but it's pushing myself out and like watching stuff now has definitely given me this massive what's the way to put this, like, respect and like gratitude for all walks of film. Like, I'll be the first to say, like, I was a person that like I'd go see things in theaters. Like if it's a big, big name movie, I'll go watch it. But I've like, since starting the show, have like branched out into more of like the indie films. And I'll
Yeah,
say
same here.
I owe that to Gary. Like when he came on, we watched Purgatory Road, which
Yeah.
was the first one we watched, and I was blown away. I was like, oh my gosh, like, why haven't I been watching indie films? Like, what's going on here? Why aren't more people seeing these? And it's, and then kind of like learning about how like Hollywood works now, and how like there's
Yeah.
so many amazing indie films out there that no
That go
one's,
unnoticed. Yeah.
they go unnoticed, but they're phenomenal films. Like we were talking about Castle Falls earlier. My friend Connor, when he was here filming that, I remember him telling us about it, like our friend group about it, because he's also a comedian. And people were like, "Oh yeah, no, like I don't know anyone that film." Like, "Oh sure, you're in a fun film." And I was like so pumped up. I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're in this amazing film! Like this is amazing. So your break,
So
like."
they didn't know Scott Adkins or Dolph Lundgren at all?
No, and I knew
Oh my
Dolph
God.
because he'd done some other films here. So like I was like, "Oh my gosh, Dolph's like amazing." Like he was training at the MMA gym that I used to go to for a film that he'd filmed here previously. And I was like, "This is so big. This is massive."
Yeah.
And kind of having that awareness now of like, I would have been someone, 2 years ago that was like, "Oh, I don't know any of these people. They don't look familiar, but like, good for you. Like, I'm still happy for you, but like, I don't know if I would have like made as much of an effort to like watch the film and promote the film as I did, not being where I am now of like understanding the film industry and how it works,
Yeah.
to the little bit of knowledge that I have just from like the consumer side, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. I know what you mean by that. Yeah. That's also another interesting thing too, that I've learned a great deal since I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, where you learn, the thing is that the real education are the things that are not taught, you know, uh, for the public to know. Like when you really learn the ins and outs of it, like, oh, okay, so certain decisions were made. We had to do it because otherwise we couldn't get this done.
Yeah.
and you come to find out why the film turned out the way that it did, or maybe it turned out really well, but to get to that film, for the film to be finished, it was an excruciating experience for the people
Mhm.
behind the scenes. So it's kind of like a very tough act to try to carry for people to I'm sorry, a thing for a lot of people to understand how that stuff works. um so when you watch a film now for yourself outside
Mhm.
of called comedy, when you're actually watching a film, do you still carry that mindset about how you approach it when you look at a film while you're doing your live stream, or do you actually separate yourself from that and look at the film for what it is without having to have those wires turned up and looking at the same way as you would on the show?
Oh, the wires just they're always going.
Okay.
It's definitely like when I'm watching, it's that voice in my head's like, oh, look at the lighting, look away that, look at this camera shot, like the, you know, looking at everything like the filming side, like logistic side for the filming, like, oh, they're in the water filming this right now. That's I
Yeah.
can see their breath. It's cold. They are putting in the work for this scene. That's always there. But I think that that voice has definitely gotten louder the longer I've been doing the show, and it's gotten louder and has started pointing out more things. But I enjoy that. I enjoy like seeing the work that people have put into things and being like, oh wow, this is amazing. Like I just went back and rewatched the Harry Potter movies because I hadn't seen them since they came out.
Did you like them?
That's what I did when I was sick. And even like I'm like on my couch dying, like coughing up a lung. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the like those candles are actually like being held up by thread. Like those are real candles. Those aren't
Yeah.
CGI. Like this is this must have been like magical for the actors, but also like they're kids and they're doing such a good job. And like watching their acting skills like develop over the entire series
Yeah.
was I grew up with them, so that wasn't something I registered as a kid, but watching it as an adult, I was like, oh, this is so good.
Is there a film that you watched that you liked and I'm not sure if you go back and watch it again and realize that it wasn't as good as I thought it was,
Oh,
that you may have done on the show,
done on the show. I'm trying to think.
or the opposite, if you didn't like it and then you
Mhm.
saw it again, like, oh, it wasn't that bad.
So one of my favorite, like, like it does. I don't even know if you'd call it like a cult comedy, but um, Saturday the 14th.
Oh yeah, I have that movie right here.
I love that movie,
Yeah.
but
Did you see the second one?
there's a second one.
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, there's a second one.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch that one now. But I remember when I watched it, it was like one of my favorite movies. I'd watch it like every time there's a Saturday the 14th, I would watch it, and it
Yeah.
was just so good.
There's
And I
actually one
remember,
next month on the 14th of May. So,
I know I'll be in England though. I'll be gone. So
uh,
I was like no. Which mean like yes, but no. But I watched it on stream, and it was kind of one of those. It wasn't so much that I didn't think it was good, but like my guests didn't like it, and no one in the chats liked it. Like no one was interacting, and I was like,
that's a great movie.
it's so good. It's
Yeah, it's a
so
fun
good.
movie. Yeah, it's a fun movie. Yeah.
There's that, and then I'm trying to think. There is one movie that we watched on stream. I'm trying to remember what it was called. Um, the Terror. I think it's the Terror of Party Beach. It's an old black and white film. There's the Del Airs, which is like an old like Beach Boys band. They play a song, and like I have the vinyl, and it was one of the first like big shows on cult comedy, like streaming wise, where like I had like a whole bunch of people tune in and people were like into it. And I remember like we made all these like inside jokes about it. We still call back to it to this day because like I got several of my like dedicated followers from that. But I went back and I watched it recently with a friend. Like I invited him over, and we were just like, yeah, let's watch this movie because they were asking about the vinyl, and I was like watching it, and I was like, it's actually really bad. Maybe it was just the environment that I was watching it
Yeah.
in, but like,
Yeah.
so I think like that's kind of the only one that comes to mind.
Okay. Do you
But
have a favorite movie though? Is there from that
favorite
you?
movie
Yeah.
is The Outsiders.
With Tom Cruise, Patrick
Yeah, Patrick
Swayze.
Swayze, all of them.
Really? What about that film
Yes.
that made be your favorite movie?
Well, it's my favorite book, which then transferred into my favorite movie. And
Oh,
it's
okay.
just one of those, tugs all of the heartstrings for me.
Yeah.
Um, just there's so many layers to it. And I was actually on a podcast a few weeks ago, and a movie podcast, and that was the movie I picked for us to talk about. And it resonates with who different parts of the movie resonate with who I am as a person, and I
Yeah.
had always have. So it's just always gonna, I guess, hold that special place in my heart. But outside of that, I would probably say Scooby-Doo Zombie Island.
Really?
Yes.
I actually have that over there, right there.
Yes.
That,
I
I saw that movie for the first time. I think it might have been last year or maybe the year before. I can't remember.
Oh gosh.
And I remember thinking, like, where have I been? Because I grew up watching Scooby Doo as a kid,
Yeah.
and I had no idea this. I mean, I remember I knew we had it, but it just
Uh-huh.
never clicked with me to watch it. I was just like, because I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of bad ones. I'm like, oh, this is not very good. And that was one of the films I assumed was gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
And I was blown away with the movie. I was floored. I was like, this is amazing. This is
Oh
so much
yeah.
better than the live shit that we got. So no
Oh
disrespect
yeah.
to anyone who worked on that, but I'm just saying it was so much more entertaining. But um, so that's your second favorite movie, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to think what else I've got. Oh, actually, I'm gonna look over here. The DVDs. Um all of mine are like old school stuff that like I watched as a kid, like Matilda, Sandlot.
Yeah.
Um
I have those right here too.
like
Matilda's
I
over
just
there.
love that like nostalgic feel. I think if
You
someone's
ever
like,
seen
I'm gonna watch,
Casper?
I love Casper.
Okay.
Like the live
Okay.
action.
Yes.
So good. The
Yeah.
Addams Family, all
Yeah.
of that sort of stuff. Ghostbusters, hands
Yeah.
down. The Frighteners. Um,
That's a great movie. Yeah.
it's so underrated. Like no one knows about it. It's so
Yeah, I
good.
know. I know. And Peter Jackson directed that too. He did Lord of the Rings, the
Yep.
first, the original trilogy, I should say. But that's a truly, truly underrated film. I agree with you on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's that. And then I think when people ask about the show, like the movie that started it all, which you can kind of see it, is Tammy and the T-Rex.
I have that
Um,
on Blu-ray. I got the special
yes.
edition one. Yeah.
It is I that was kind of the movie where this show clicked in my brain of like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And this is the movie. That was the first one we did. And for my live shows, I make coloring books based on the movie.
Okay.
And it was, that movie will always hold a special place in my heart, but it's also kind of surrounded by like what transpired around it. Like this grew out of Tammy and the T-Rex.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Is is there like is there something about films for you? Well, let me take this back. This is a question I really want to ask you. Doing this here, watching the films, after everything you shared with me here about how you've developed as a person, how you became more business savvy and filtering out what works and what doesn't work. Do you think in a lot of ways for yourself that it's actually more therapeutic for you, where you've learned a lot about yourself and how you handle things? Probably didn't handle things as well as you did before, but then throughout the years, you've kind of developed the skill to be able to handle things better, which then transferred over to how you go about and conducting yourself with the show and everything else associated with it. So, do you feel like in a lot of ways that you've learned a lot about yourself and helped yourself in that respect?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've learned a lot. I've pushed myself out of like my comfort zone so much over like the last, year and a half, 2 years of doing this, to where like I know like what I'm comfortable doing, and like even if it's something new, I'm gonna know like, oh hey, we'll be good with that because it's similar to this.
Mm,
Um, and I feel like that was something about myself before that I didn't know. It's like I have to try something before I know if I'm gonna like it or if I'm gonna be comfortable.
right.
Business wise, I've definitely developed a bit more of a thicker skin of
Yeah.
just like knowing like we need to stand up for ourselves. We need to know like our boundaries. We need to set them. We need to stick by them. And also like it's helped me, with like reaching out to people that I look back, I have like messages saved in my phone from when I first started like DMing people to be on the show compared to like what I send people now. Like I have a template, and not that it's impersonal, but like I have a template of like, this is the opening paragraph that we need to talk about what we like why we want them on the show. And then like, here's closing. And so like looking at what I send to people now compared to what I did in the past, I'm like, oh gosh, there's a reason no one DM'd me back.
Yeah. You wrote like a novel, right?
Yeah, I'm like a full novel, and it's
Yeah,
just
I've
like,
done that before too. Yeah, I've done that before.
oh yeah.
Yeah. So here's a question that I actually meant to ask you from the very beginning here.
Mhm.
And I hope you don't mind me asking this here. But do you think you're much happier now doing what you're doing now, discovering the things you've discovered about yourself and what else is out there for you to carry on with this passion that you have here for with what you do in the show, among other things as well too? Do
Mhm.
you feel that you're in a better place as a result to what you've gone through as well?
Oh yeah, I am. I was thinking about this the other day. I think I'm the happiest I've been in my entire life, like
Okay.
right now.
What's actually the worst experience you've had in doing the show that made you probably second guess about, you know what, I don't know if I want to continue on this anymore?
I don't think I've had anything that stopped me from like wanting to do it. Um, I think there was like at one point, like I've had a few people that have kind of um, like viewers that have tried like pushing past boundaries with me of just like oh we you should do this more, you should giving me what's the best way to put this,
Like rough suggestions?
not like rough suggestions, but also um like pushing past, like there's, and I'm sure that you experience this, like you have your show and you have your viewers, and like while you love your viewers and they're there for you, like there's a boundary there that you know
I don't think I've ever had that experience at all.
okay.
Because the thing is that from my position here,
Hmm.
I this is all pre-recorded, obviously, and
Okay,
you
yeah.
have direct connection with the
Mhm.
audience here. Um, so I honestly have never had that experience at
Okay,
all. So yeah,
I'll say there's been some instances where I was like I don't know if I'm like ready to have people in my business this much, if that makes sense,
yeah,
um like without getting like too into it, I just had like I don't know if like people that were a little like too invested in what I was doing. And it's just like, like this is still just a show. This isn't my full-time job. Like you're only going to get an allotted amount from me and that's all I have to give you. Um and just like people getting upset that I wasn't able to do more. Like when people get mad at me, that's kind of one of those things where I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't want you to be mad at me. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this to like give everyone kind of a bit of a reprieve. Like we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about,
yeah,
you know, most of the time we don't talk about current events unless they're funny. And
yeah.
it's like this is a safe space. And if that's not what I'm providing, then why am I doing this? And so kind of like that's maybe the closest that I've come to is just kind of getting it kind of backed into a corner where I wasn't telling someone stop, like, no, we're not doing this until I got upset. And then I was like, I need to make sure that this doesn't happen if I'm going to keep doing this because
Yeah.
I mentally can't do this long term.
Yeah, I see. Um, I've already said it before, but I'm going to say it again here because I honestly did not expect this conversation to turn out the way that it did, quite
Okay.
frankly. And that's a good thing too, because again, when you and I were messaging back and forth on Instagram about, uh, I said we'll probably talk about pop culture stuff, but I honestly, I remember when I said that to you, I was like, why did I say that? Because I thought maybe I think if I recall correctly, I thought keep it within the context of what you'd seen her do. Maybe she
Mhm.
probably would be leaning more towards that because I wasn't really sure how this would go about here because from what I've seen you discuss before on the show before that it's all over the place, but it's pretty consistent across the board for the most part, I would say. So I think at the time I might have said that just to be more or less like be safe about it because I didn't want to give the wrong impression. We'll talk about whatever because I didn't want to seem as if though there is no structure. There is, but there isn't. Like I know a way I want to approach the conversation, but if I don't know the person well at all, I have to look at something they've done before for me to kind of get something off of them for me to be able to know how I want to steer the conversation if it gets to a certain point. And I think I've gotten a lot better with that along the way. So I felt pretty comfortable in asking, let me start off with the very basic stuff without having to ask you, where did you grow up? Because I figured that's something that you've already discussed before on the show on more than one occasion. So I didn't feel the need to do that. So for you to share a lot about yourself, and for me to learn a lot about what you've been able to accomplish here and what your intentions are, and how clearly you have a lot of confidence in what you're doing, and then be able to take it to the next level here. Quite frankly, I find that to be really, really inspiring in a lot of ways. And when I'm saying that, I'm certainly not saying that you are the example. I'm not trying to say that, but inspiring in ways that what you're doing, when other people are saying to you, it's a waste of time, more or less,
Mhm.
or I don't understand why you're being so standoffish when I ask you about X, Y, and Z, and you're like, no, 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 you don't understand it. So I'm hoping that whoever listens to this here truly understands where you're coming from, and they have the context about why you're going about it this way here, because we had the time to talk about that. So that's why I love these long form conversations, because you just never know what's going to come out of it. And this is what I hope would come out of it here. So that way, as I said before, in time, when someone looks back at this here, I'm hoping whoever that person was in your life that did not like you at that time when you
Mhm.
said no to them for whatever those reasons may be, and they look at this interview somewhere down the line and say, you know what, I completely misread her and I was wrong. Let me call her and say, I'm sorry, I was an asshole, and I didn't take the time to understand to listen to you. And I
Mhm.
listened to this 4 hour plus podcast with this guy, and I heard everything, and now I get it. I'm
Mhm.
sorry it took so long for me to get to that point. I actually do hope that does happen somewhere down the line here for you. Um, it wasn't my intention, but when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking like, I hope this comes to fruition with someone that start off in a relationship with you, didn't understand it, and then understands it later on by listening to this here. I hope they take the time to do that here, because I think it's the only way you're going to be able to learn about the person, if you take the time.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful that you've given me the time out of your day to
Of course.
give me that. So I'm honored and I'm very grateful as well. So, if is there anything that you want to say in closing about anything you may have coming up that you are able to provide for people to be on the lookout for, that you're going to be working on, that will, by the time this will be uploaded here, that people can be prepared to be expecting?
Just that if they're local, there'll be live shows in Birmingham. Um, every Thursday night at Trim Tab Brewing. They're putting me up with a residency. They want me there all the time, so I'm there every Thursday, and I think that's gonna be about it. We've got
I know
putting the
there's some other things you're
strings.
doing right now that you can't talk
Yeah,
about. That part I
there's
get.
stuff
But
that I can't talk about. It's still the stuff that's like contracts haven't been signed yet, so I'm like I can't
yeah,
say it's
right.
gonna happen and then it not.
Yeah.
But I mean, just I stream Monday, Wednesday, Fridays on Twitch. So
Well,
come join the cult.
I'll be sure that, by the time this uploads here, that I
Mhm.
have all the links in the description below
Okay.
for everyone to follow here, social media, Twitch, and all that stuff, so that when they see that and they hear you saying that, it's all going to be available for them to look out for that. But otherwise, for the camera, again, I just want to say thank you. I really, really love this conversation a lot. I think this is the most in depth I've ever had with someone in the show here, where we had gone deeper and deeper and deeper and discovered more things on the way. So I'll never forget this conversation. So if anything, thank you for the gift that you've bestowed onto me here. So thank you again.
And thank you for having me. This was absolutely wonderful.
I appreciate that. Well, all right. So for the camera, I'm gonna.